Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. Today we're reading from David Blight's book, Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom. This is from the introduction. In his speech at the dedication of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., September 24, 2016, President Barack Obama delivered what he termed a, quote, clear-eyed view of a tragic and triumphant history of black Americans in the United States. He spoke of a history that is central to the larger American story, one that is both contradictory and extraordinary. He likened the African American experience to the infinite depths of Shakespeare and Scripture. The, quote, embrace of truth as best we can know it, said the president, is, quote, where real patriotism lies. Naming some of the major pivots of the country's past, Obama wrapped up his central theme in a remarkable sentence about the Civil War era. Quote, we've buttoned up our Union blues to join the fight for our freedom. We've railed against injustice for decade upon decade, a lifetime of struggle and progress and enlightenment that we see etched in Frederick Douglass's mighty leonine gaze, end quote. How Americans react to Douglass's gaze, indeed how we gaze back at his visage, and more important, how we read him, appropriate him, or engage his legacies, informs how we use our past to determine who we are. Douglass's life and writing emerged from nearly the full scope of the 19th century, representative of the best and the worst in the American spirit. Douglass constantly probed the ironies of America's contradictions over slavery and race. Few Americans use Shakespeare and the Bible to comprehend his story and that of his people as much as Douglass. And there may be no better example of an American radical patriot than the slave who became a lyrical prophet of freedom, natural rights, and human equality. Obama channeled Douglass in his dedication speech, knowingly or not. So do many people today. Born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, a slave, in Talbot County, Maryland, in February 1818, the future Frederick Douglass was the son of Harriet Bailey, one of 5 daughters of Betsy Bailey, and with some likelihood his mother's white owner. He saw his mother for the last time in 1825, though he hardly knew her. She died the following year. Douglass lived 20 years as a slave and nearly 9 years as a fugitive slave subject to recapture. From the 1840s to his death in 1895, he attained international fame as an abolitionist, editor, orator of almost unparalleled signature, and the author of 3 autobiographies that are classics of the genre. As a public man, he began his abolitionist career 2 decades before America would divide and fight a civil war over slavery that he openly welcomed. Douglass was born in a backwater of the slave society of the South, just as steamboats appeared in bays and on American rivers, and before the telegraph, the railroad, and the rotary press changed human mobility and consciousness. He died after the emergence of electric lights, the telephone, and the invention of the phonograph. The renewed orator and traveler loved and used most of these elements of modernity and technology. Douglass was the most photographed American of the 19th century, explained in this book, and especially by the intrepid research of 3 other scholars I write upon. Although it can never really be measured, he may also have been, along with Mark Twain, the most widely traveled American public figure of his century. By the 1890s, in sheer miles and countless number of speeches, he had few rivals as a lecturer in the golden age of oratory. It is likely that more Americans heard Frederick Douglass speak than any other public figure of his time. Indeed, to see or hear Douglass became a kind of wonder of the American world. He struggled as well with the pleasures and perils of fame as much as anyone else in his century, with the possible exceptions of General Ulysses S. Grant or P.T. Barnum. Douglas's dilemma with fame was a matter of decades, not merely of moments, and fraught with racism. The orator and writer lived to see and interpret black emancipation, to work actively for women's rights long before they were achieved, to realize the civil rights triumphs and tragedies of Reconstruction, and to witness and contribute to America's economic and international expansion in the Gilded Age. He lived to the age of lynching and Jim Crow laws, when America collapsed into retreat from the real victories and revolutions in race relations that he had helped to win. He played a pivotal role in America's second founding out of the apocalypse of the Civil War, and he very much wished to see himself as a founder and defender of the Second American Republic. In one lifetime of anti-slavery, literary, and political activism, Douglas was many things, and the set of apparent paradoxes makes his story so attractive to biographers, as well as to so many constituencies today. He was a radical thinker and a proponent of classic 19th century political liberalism. At different times, he hated and loved his country. He was a ferocious critic of the United States and all its hypocrisies, but also, after emancipation, became a government bureaucrat, a diplomat, and a voice for territorial expansion. He strongly believed in self-reliance and demanded an activist interventionist government at all levels to free slaves, defeat the Confederacy, and to protect black citizens against terror and discrimination. Douglas was a serious constitutional thinker, and few Americans have ever analyzed race with more poignancy and nuance than this mostly self-taught genius with words. He was a radical editor, writer, and activist. The book Frederick Douglass by David Blight.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Part of their team. Unwanted Spy by Jeffrey Sterling.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And happy Thursday. So, Donald Trump has threatened the fate and future of human civilization, joining the fossil fuel industry billionaires to deny climate change. I mean, let's just look at some of the things that Donald Trump actually should be impeached for, in my opinion. I am very concerned. We talked about this some yesterday. Feel free to weigh in your opinions on what you think he should or should not be impeached for, and whether the Democrats need to go wide or narrow. I'm increasingly thinking they need to go wide, and the main reason actually is that it's increasingly looking like the Senate will not vote to impeach Trump. They will not vote to remove him from office. So what's going on here is a statement for history. It's a statement for the future. It's a way for the House of Representatives to say, essentially, never again. We will not tolerate this behavior from any future presidents of the United States, be they Republican or Democratic. As a president of the United States, you cannot conspire with an industry to destroy the quality of life on this planet, or for that matter, to destroy all life on this planet, or much of the life on this planet, certainly all large-scale mammalian and human life. He has threatened peace by upending our relationships with our other democratic allies and aligning himself instead with dictators, murderers, and autocrats. He's sold off our public lands to his donors and his cronies. He's devastated our public parks and our sacred places. He's installed an anti-labor labor secretary and an anti-public school education secretary, who, by the way, Betsy DeVos yesterday proposed a scheme whereby all of the student debt, there's $1.5 trillion in student debt out there, and thanks to this bankruptcy bill of 2005, you cannot declare bankruptcy and get rid of your student debt. And so what Betsy, but there is this program to reduce student debt. In fact, NPR did some really great reporting on this yesterday afternoon. There is this program to eliminate student debt for low-income people, And Betsy DeVos has been sabotaging it. There are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who qualify to have their debt wiped out, and she's not letting it happen. And now she said that all of the student debt should be moved into a separate government corporation. Why? Because right now, because the student debt is held, largely by the executive branch, as it were, by, the Department of Education. Right now, the president could issue a presidential order, a proclamation, a presidential executive order that simply says no more student debt. President Warren or President Sanders could do that in one day. And Betsy DeVos, her family, according to Ryan Grimm over at The Intercept, what he wrote. He said the DeVos family is heavily invested in the student loan industry. This is just flat out corruption. Because if you move that debt into a separate government corporation, then the president can no longer wipe out the student debt. Betsy DeVos is seen, and Donald Trump are seeing the possibility of a President Warren or a President Sanders, and they're saying, no, you won't be able to wipe out student debt. And and Trump is down with that. He's broadly corrupted a government that Americans fought and died for 240 years. He has enriched himself at the expense of the American people and given people like Jared Kushner, a grifter and a clear security risk, according to our nation's intelligence agencies, access to our country's most sensitive secrets. He's welcomed foreign interference in our elections openly. In the 2016 election, in the 2020 election, and then when that foreign interference came in the 2016 election, he obstructed Robert Mueller's investigation. On at least 10 items of obstruction of justice are listed in the Mueller report. And Robert Mueller himself said all of these are things that he could be impeached for. He's brought the office of the presidency into ridicule and disrepute. Joe Biden has a new ad out pointing out that the rest of the world is literally laughing at Donald Trump. And I think probably crying about us. This is what America has come to. Impeachment is not just a process of slapping a president's hand or even just a process of removing him from office. We remember what we remember about the Bill Clinton administration because Bill Clinton got caught with Monica Lewinsky. We remember what we remember about the Nixon administration because of the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. During the Nixon impeachment, there was a fairly robust debate in the House of Representatives about whether they should include in the articles of impeachment that he had secretly bombed Cambodia. It was a violation of the law. It was a violation of international treaties. It went on for months. It killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. And ultimately they decided, we're not going to include that in the articles of impeachment. And so now here we are, 40, 50 years later, and when people talk about Nixon being impeached, they don't point out that he illegally bombed Cambodia, and Laos for that matter. But the debate was around Cambodia. I mean, look at what Donald Trump is doing. He's promoting war crimes. He campaigned in 2016 on war crimes. Yeah, we should have more torture. We should have more waterboarding. We should have more people die in custody. He said that when you find a terrorist, you should kill their family. It's a clear violation of U.S. law, international law. It's a clear war crime. I think all these things should be included in the articles of impeachment because it is an historic document. It defines for the future of our country, for generations of people who right now might be 5 or 10 years old or might not even be born yet, who will have no clear memory of this impeachment hearing. It tells them what happened during the Trump administration. I mean, we should not make the mistake that we made even with the Nixon impeachment of only impeaching, Nixon for a very narrow range of things. We need to lay it out. I mean, this is what they did with the Andrew Johnson impeachment. They even impeached him. One of the articles of impeachment was that he brought disrepute to the office. In other words, we're better than this. We believe that the office of the presidency should have integrity. And what am I missing, by the way? I mean, this is just my off the top of my head list that Louise and I came up with this morning. His violations of the Emoluments Clause, his ordering the Air Force to put their refueling planes in an obscure airport in Scotland. This just happens to be right down the road from his hotel, where he's saying that the pilots should spend the night. Where they can't, on their per diem, they can't even afford to eat in the Trump restaurant because it's so expensive. His ownership of the Trump hotel, when the federal government lease says no office holder can own the lease for the old government post office, which is what the Trump hotel is in. His blocking the sale of the FBI building, which is right across the street from the Trump hotel. His blocking the sale of the FBI building. The FBI said this building is old. It was built back in the 50s. It is out of date. We want to move it. I believe it was the 50s, might have been the 60s, but it was back in that era. And the FBI wanted to move it out to Virginia. They wanted to where the traffic is not insane and where you're not, right in the middle of the scrum and everything. And, FBI, I mean, they do a lot of stuff. They wanted to move their building out to Virginia. And Trump says, no, you can't move that building. Why? Because the companies that were most interested in buying it when the government would tear it down and sell the lot right across the street from the Trump hotel, the companies most interested in buying it were Hilton and Marriott. Trump didn't want the competition for his hotel. Isn't that impeachable? So, I'm seeing this long list, selling off public lands, selling our resources for pennies on the dollar. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And, help me build this list. What else should he be impeached for? Or do you think that I'm wrong? Do you think that, they should say, this Ukraine thing, it's clearly a crime. Nobody's arguing that it's not. Well, I guess Trump is. He's now saying, well, when I said do us a favor, actually, that was a little later in the conversation. He said, I meant U.S., Right. I got a letter from him this morning. I'll share that with you a little later on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back. It's 15 minutes past the hour. Coming up on 16 minutes past the hour. I'll pick up your calls after this. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Jared in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. I want to talk about impeachment for Trump. And you brought up a good point with Cambodia. I feel like that something that has been missed with the Trump administration is the fact that Donald Trump's war policy, the neoconservative agenda, has been basically still in full swing. For example, I've cited this before, but Air Wars cited that Donald Trump killed more civilians in 9 months with drone strikes than Obama did in 8 years.
Whoa! And everybody was criticizing Obama for his drone strikes. Yeah. Straight from Air Wars.
I mean, a lot of it had to do with ISIS, but those are still civilians. I mean, that was with the Mosul and Raqqa, but he drops a bomb every 13 minutes around the world. That doesn't get covered. He's attacked the Syrian Arab Republic at least over. He
sold out the Kurds.
Sold out the Kurds. He supported the fascist coup in Bolivia.
Yep.
It is. He's increased civilian casualties in places like Iraq, and none of this seems to be getting covered at all.
Yeah. No, I agree. Excellent points, and the two in particular that I like are, his selling out the Kurds and his supporting the coup in Bolivia. That's good stuff. Thank you very much, Jared. That's a good contribution to our list. Sarah in Fort Worth, Texas. Sarah, your thoughts?
Hi, Tom. Before I get to my thoughts quickly, I want to thank you. I called before the election, 2016, about my son that didn't vote, and ever since then, he's voted in every election.
Woohoo!
And
That's great.
I was at his apartment the other day, and I had already given him a couple of your books, and there are a whole lot more of your books in his. So I really want to thank you.
Oh, great!
You motivated him.
Thank you,
okay,
Sarah.
back to the point. I think we should go wide. I understand the argument to go narrow, but if we do go wide, wouldn't that cover like Jared and Ivanka and Kellyanne Conway and all the others? Because no one's talking. Wouldn't they be complicit?
Kellyanne and the violations of the, it's not the Hatch Act, or is it the Hatch Act?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Hatch Act.
I think it is the Hatch Act.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that cover all of them if we did go wide?
I would.
Like,
the Hatch Act and Kellyanne, yep.
I want a big net.
I want a big net, not just because you catch more fish with a big net, but also I think that it's really important for the historic record that we define what is unacceptable behavior in an executive and a chief executive. Because some of these crimes, like this Hatch Act stuff, Trump isn't the first person to do this, to tolerate Hatch Act violations. His failure to turn over his income tax returns. I mean,
Yeah.
Although that's not something that's in the law. Well, what is in the law is that he has to turn them over to the head of the Ways and Means Committee, which he is not doing. So, Sarah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and say hi to your son for me.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Good talking to you. Thank you. Thank you. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Stick around. The only two presidents who were ever impeached, the Supreme Court and the betrayal of America, credibly accused of crimes that rose to the level of impeachment laws, and then those crimes were review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court, and most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The hidden history of the Supreme Court and the betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. We've added a few things to our list. The betrayal of the Kurds, conducting foreign policy at the request of a foreign dictator, Erdogan, supporting the coup in Bolivia,
Venezuela,
supporting the overthrow of the Venezuelan government, the violations of the Hatch Act by Kellyanne Conway and others in his administration, his refusing to turn over his tax returns when the law clearly says he has to turn them over to the House Ways and Means chairman. I mean, we're building a list here. Victoria in Upland, California. Hey, Victoria, your suggestion or thoughts?
Hi, I can't actually add to the list. You guys have a big one, but I wanted to let you know I am in California. However, I live in a very Republican, very conservative, Trump-supporting pocket of California. And I have to say that the impeachment articles need to include other things other than the Ukraine scandal, because I'm looking at my neighbors and none of them are really offended by what they're seeing in these hearings.
Right.
What would offend them is to hear that their tax dollars are going to pay for Donald Trump's friends who are getting government contracts and screwing the public, or that his family is enriching themselves on the taxpayer dollar. And the taxes, of course, if people want to know that everyone's paying their fair share. But these hearings that my friends who are Trump supporting are watching aren't offended by them. They're just not. They are willing to look the other way. They're very one or two issue kind of voters, and he's on those issues like abortion and taxes, lowering the taxes, even though it doesn't trickle down to my friends. For some reason, they've been convinced that this is helping them. And I think if we introduce articles of impeachment that include things that they can relate to, because no one's relating to, the Ukraine president. No one cares.
Right.
When I talk to them, they just don't.
Yeah, that's over there. This is over here. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it doesn't affect them. So I just think it should be at least 4 or 5 of these points where they feel like it's hurting their personal pocket as a taxpayer, and that Trump and family are enriching themselves. I think that would help tremendously to get their attention. Otherwise, I think we're kind of...
Go ahead. Otherwise, we're kind of...
That's it.
Oh, that's it. Okay. He cut his own taxes. That's and he's enriching his buddies. I'm sorry, I'm making notes here while we're talking. He cut his own taxes too. $1.5 trillion of tax cuts for billionaires and his buddies and his corporations. That's a good one. Thank you very much, Victoria. Donald in Aurora, Illinois. Hey, Donald, what do you have?
Yes, hi, Tom. One thing I do want to mention now that you're on the list, before I had one of the call for what I called for, is, and I don't know if you remember this, when he first got elected, he attended a meeting that he met some Russian dignitaries coming after he came out of a classified meeting and told them about troop movements in Syria, if I recall.
You're right, and this was information that he had gotten from Israeli intelligence. He burned Israeli intelligence. You're right.
Yeah, so that's one of the things you could put on. But the reason why I did call is I can't understand why one of the reporters that was on MSNBC attacked what's her name, Pelosi, and said that, why is it the Democrats hate the Donald Trump so much? Why do they hate the president? She went off on this guy. But there's one thing, and maybe you could remember. I seen this clip on television. I don't know if it's from MSNBC or CNN, a reporter that was interviewing him shortly after he won the election. She sat down and talked to him, and she went on to ask him, why is it that you're always saying that people hate you, that everybody hates you when you won this election? He says, you have to say that, because if you can't pass anything, you can always blame it on that they always hate you. He had that in his mindset already. He put that out there from the day he stepped into that.
Well, that's not unique to Donald Trump, Donald. No, I mean, that's something that politicians frequently do. It's just, it's a fancy way it's an inflammatory way of saying this is all political. This is just, this is they're going after me because they don't, they disagree with my politics or they don't like me. I mean, they try to personalize it and stuff like that. But
yeah, but
the fact of the matter is there are a lot of people who do hate Donald Trump. I mean, it's just it's unfortunate. I think Pelosi really elevated the discussion by saying, no, I was raised a good Catholic. I don't hate anybody. I learned to love everybody. I pray for Donald Trump regularly and don't use the word hate in the same sentence with me. That's essentially what she said this morning. And I tip my hat to her. I mean, same here. I literally occasionally pray for our president and everybody else in leadership. And I think we all should. At least all of us who pray, I think that, or send good vibes or whatever, there's always hope. There's always hope for redemption. It's always possible that people can wake up. And the language of hate is really the language of the hard right. It always has been. I mean, that's how the Nazis rose to power, the super hard right. But all your points are well made, Donald. Thank you very much, and thank you for the call. We're hitting the break here at the bottom of the hour, coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. Joe Biden has a new ad out. It's blistering Trump.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And I will play that ad right after the break. Stick around. It continues to December 11th. A donor has stepped up and, bless you, whoever you may be, and said they're going to make a $50,000 donation to a $10,000 donation to Free Speech TV if people in 50 states, all 50 states, one new donor in each state can be acquired or whatever. If one new person who has never before donated to Free Speech TV will pick up the phone right now and call 877-378-8669 and make a donation of any amount, $1, whatever it may be, any amount, today, actually it's going to run for a week or so. We'll let you know if we hit it. I think this is, just looking at this from a mathematical point of view, if you live in a state that has a small population, like Vermont with 600,000 people or Wyoming with a little over 1 million, and you have never donated to Free Speech TV before, and you are inclined to think that this is a network worth supporting, now would be a great time. Now, yeah, I mean, if you're in a big state too, but, in a state with millions and millions of people, California, I'm guessing, will get a new donor today without a problem. Although if you're in California, don't hesitate. But particularly small and medium-sized states, call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution. If we can get 50 states in on this thing, $10,000 goes to Free Speech TV. So your gift becomes much, much bigger, no matter how much your gift is. Free Speech TV is such a vital part of the American progressive media infrastructure. We need this network. We need it alive. We need it strong. We need it continuing. We need your help. We can't do it without you. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV literally does not exist without donations from our listeners. And help keep the great programming on the air that you really like, the shows that you really like, help us keep this thing going. So please call now, 877-378-8669. I realize it's the holiday season. We don't have like gift cards that say, a donation has been made in your name to Free Speech TV, but you can create one. If you've got Christmas cards and you want to send a note to somebody, you want to call and make a contribution to Free Speech TV. I don't think they have a way of tracking it, but you could do it. I mean, you don't need anything from Free Speech TV to do this. Just, write in your Christmas card, I made a donate, and in fact, you could tell numerous people that you made a Free Speech TV donation in their name. It's a way of kind of spreading the word, and hopefully next holiday season we can do something like this. We did years ago, I know, and if I got a Christmas card from somebody and it said, hey, I made a donation to Free Speech TV and I'm doing it in my mind, in your name. I'm doing it in recognition of our friendship. I think that would be a cool thing. So, you can get creative. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this. But also, Free Speech TV also has, these premiums, and, we're getting pretty close to the holiday season. This is the shortest period between Thanksgiving and Christmas possible is right now. I mean, it's happening this year. So I doubt that things will be arriving before Christmas. But for example, if you wanted to give all 3 of my books to somebody, the $360 or $30 a month gift, you could send them a Christmas card saying that, you're going to be getting these because I made this donation. And when I get the books, I'll send them to you, and they're all autographed by the author. But the premiums today, the sticker Gravity is the only law Trump hasn't broken. It's $20. The tote bag, Nobody is Above the Law, that's $50. There's a $120 T-shirt gift. That would be $10 a month for a year, or just $120 up front. The online after class with Professor Thom, that's $240. Or $20 a month for a year. The 3 books I mentioned earlier, that is my new book on ADHD, Hunter and a Farmer's World, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Those 3 books, $360. And a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and hang out with us, and we'll have a nice time. And just like with the $240 gift, our virtual meet and greet, our online meet and greet, whatever you want to talk about, I'm up for it. We can discuss anything. We've had some pretty wild and pretty interesting conversations in some of these meet and greets, both in person and online. But now, please call, particularly, like I said, if you're in a small or medium-sized state. But no matter where you are, if you've never donated to Free Speech TV before, today is the day. please call now, 877-378-8669. That's 877-378-8669. You can also donate online at freespeech.org. So please call now and make your contribution. Become a part of the Free Speech TV family, particularly if you can give a sustaining gift. Thank you. It's 34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And we have this ad by Joe Biden. This is, I think what's most interesting about this is it's going after Donald Trump's most vulnerable point. And it's not a political vulnerability, it's a personal vulnerability. And that is that Donald Trump, you'll recall during the Obama presidency, Trump, they played a montage of these things yesterday on MSNBC. Donald Trump was constantly saying that, essentially the subtext was, because we have a black president, the world is laughing at us. And he just, over and over and over again, he would say the world is laughing at us. Well, right now the world is laughing at Donald Trump, or at least the world's leaders. And that's what Joe Biden is pointing out. And this ad has got to just blistered Trump's skin. I mean, just check this thing out.
World leaders caught on camera laughing about President Trump.
Several world leaders mocking President Trump.
They're laughing at him.
My administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
World leaders mocking and ridiculing him for being completely off balance.
Allies are deeply worried about it. They say he's becoming increasingly isolated. Something is very wrong.
The world sees Trump for what he is: insincere, ill-informed, corrupt, dangerously incompetent, and incapable, in my view, of world leadership. And if we give Donald Trump 4 more years, we'll have a great deal of difficulty, if ever, being able to recover America's standing in the world and our capacity to bring nations together.
So there it is. The implied message, of course, is that Joe Biden is the guy who can make America, stand tall in the saddle, or sit tall in the saddle, or whatever the phrase was from back when Ronnie Reagan was doing this kind of stuff. I think, frankly, any of the Democrats who are running for president would be a huge improvement over this guy, and frankly, over any Republican. But anyhow, it's going to be interesting to see if Trump explodes. I mean, and if he does, and this is, I'm guessing that there have been a lot of politicians who've been afraid to go this way, because they're concerned that if Trump does explode, that he might do something insanely stupid. He might start a war with Iran. He might start a war with North Korea. He might, and by the way, Kim Jong-un yesterday or the day before was out riding his white horse on the sacred mountain and saying a big announcement is coming, and the guess and saying, by the way, that he could invade South Korea anytime he wants and he could take on the United States. The guess in most political circles right now, or Korea watchers, is that he's going to announce that North Korea is now officially a nuclear power, complete with short, medium, and long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of delivering nuclear warheads pretty much anywhere he wants, and submarines, nuclear-powered submarines. We will see. We'll see exactly what it is, but anyhow, that's going on. So, Travis in Cleveland, Ohio. Hey, Travis, what's on your mind today?
How you doing, sir?
Good. What's up?
New listener, I have a quick question. As a longtime conservative, always voted Republican, I believe this next time around is going to be my first time I vote Democrat, just because enough said. But the one thing I'm struggling with the Democrats, with Bernie and Miss Warren, is you touched off at the very beginning of the show regarding the school loans.
Right.
About forgiving all the debt with the school loans.
Right.
The where I struggle with that is these kids have choices to go to community colleges and transfer to four-year institutions, but they want the college experience. So I guess I'm struggling with why forgive all these loans when there's plenty of options out there. And I guess then the other question would be, who's going to pay for this?
Right. Well, it's $1.5 trillion, Travis. We gave $1.5 trillion to billionaires and big corporations 2 years ago, and with the theory that it was going to stimulate the economy. Minor stimulus, mostly companies, over $1 trillion of it was used just for stock buybacks, and most billionaires just put the money in the bank. So, $1.5 trillion, which is the total of the student loan debt, apparently not a big deal, at least in Donald Trump world. So who's going to pay for it? Well, you can add it to the debt if you'd like. Eventually it'll get paid off. But I think the larger question is, why would you do that? Why would a country want to have free education for its students? We did this after World War II with the GI Bill. Harry Truman pushed this through. Dwight Eisenhower was a big fan of it and promoted it, and in fact extended it. It ran right up into the mid-60s, or the early 60s. And the GI Bill said that, if you'd been in the military during World War II, you could go to college absolutely for free. And in fact, they paid a stipend. My dad was paid $200 a month to go to college up in Grand Rapids. And
I have family members that's done the same thing.
Yeah, and my wife's father also. And my dad had to drop out after 2 years because Mom got pregnant with me, and he went to work in a steel mill and ended up, as a tool and die maker. But Louise's dad went all the way up at MSU, got his law degree, and became the Assistant Attorney General for the state of Michigan. And what we found from that experience was two things came out of giving free education to literally an entire generation of young people, mostly young men who were in the war, but there was a lot of fallout with women as well. And of course, college tuition was kept low at that point because colleges were well funded. The two things we learned were, number one, they started doing the math on this in the 1980s, where they could look back at it and over a 2-generation period. Number one, that for every dollar we spent sending somebody to college, we received over their lifetime in the workplace $7 in tax revenue that we wouldn't have gotten if they had not had a higher paying job because they had a college degree. Number one. So it's an investment. That's why we're the only country in the world that doesn't provide, the only developed country in the world that doesn't provide free college to all of its students. In Denmark, they pay you $400 a month to go to school, and they pay for your books, and they'll give you a rent, subsidy. In Germany, same thing. In fact, there's American students who are going to school in Germany because their equivalent of out-of-state tuition is like, $2,000-3,000 in Germany to go to a school that's the equivalent of, some of the best schools in America. And it's not just Germany. I mean, Moldova, I believe. There's a bunch of former Soviet states now that have completely free education, because in part for the reason that I just said. Every dollar you invest, you get $7 back. And in fact, now there's another study that just came out last year that suggested that instead of $7, it was actually a $10 return on investment. In part because a lot of these people who got their degrees didn't just work until they were 60 or 65. They continued to work into their 70s. And many of them started making more money than anybody expected. But then the second thing that came out of that was America in the 1960s and 70s became the world leader in innovation. We invented everything from Velcro to transistors to integrated circuits to the internet. And that was because we had one of the most well-educated populaces in the world, in part because Europe and Japan had been bombed. We'd had bombed the bejesus out of them. They had free public education, but people were just trying to get their houses rebuilt and get back on their feet. But the bottom line is that free college education turned us into the world's leader in innovation. And right now, just in the last 2 years, China has surpassed the United States in new patents. Because in China, everybody can go to college for free. In the United States, no, you can't. And in fact, China will even, for their most promising students, they'll subsidize sending them to American universities or other universities around the world. So every other country in the world gets it, that this is an investment in their intellectual infrastructure, and it's an investment, just a pure monetary investment in their future, in terms of just revenue in, revenue out. So that said, why wouldn't we say, having the first generation in American history to go massively in debt? I mean, this is so disruptive So this generation of young people, they're not able to get married, at the age that people did when I was a kid. People are waiting until their 30s and 40s to get married. They're not able to have families. They're not able to buy homes. You want to stimulate the housing market? Pay off all the student debt. People are not buying houses. Young people are not buying houses because they can't afford a mortgage. They can't even qualify for a mortgage because they've got tens of thousands of dollars in student debt. I realize the conservative argument that it's all about individual choice and people should be held responsible for their choices. But those choices always exist in a much larger context. And this larger context is that our government and our society, our culture, have been saying to young people ever since the 50s, really, in a big way, and particularly since the 70s when Nixon got his first free trade deals in 74. And as a result of that, we started seeing the decline in manufacture in the United States, which picked up incredible steam under Reagan and Bush and Clinton. We are as a society telling people, you got to go to college. And so, what are young people going to do? They feel like, if I want to have any kind of future at all, if I want to have a life, if I want to have a family, if I want to, be able to have a positive impact in the world, I need a college education. And by the way, I would add that Warren and Sanders, their free college programs also include trade schools. Back to you, Travis.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, again, that's what I was just looking for because, my wife and I were both Gen Xers. And, we worked third shifts, paid for our own school in, 2 years, and then transferred on to 4-year schools. And again,
but no, I did the same thing.
Helps. And I just keep hearing there, but, we'll give everything away free. And I guess my biggest struggle was, I hear kids coming out of school, I'm $80,000 debt, and they went to school for social services, coming out making $30,000 a year. And, there's options. Again, they need to be educated. I guess I haven't heard them talk about the trade schools or the local 2-year schools like we have here in Cleveland, like Cuyahoga Community College or Tri-C, where they could go there the 2 years and transfer.
That's the foundation of to the best of my knowledge, all of the free college plans basically start you in a 2-year college. I may be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
And the circle of friends we run, we all have the same views. We're all very fiscally conservative, but we all have very social views. And it's amazing how many of our friends that have been Republicans are going to vote Democrat this next time around, but we're struggling with Bernie and Miss Warren, so we're just hoping someone else can come out of the pack. And honestly, I do. But, I'm a new listener. Enjoy the show. I think you got a new listener with me, so I appreciate all your insight and taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you, sir.
And I look forward to future conversations with you. Thank you very much. It's great to hear from you. Rudy in Atlanta. Hey, Rudy, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing, sir?
Good. What's on your mind?
Hey, I'm listening to you, and the problem in this country, it's not Trump. He's just a symptom. It's the people that's allowed him to do it. I was listening to that minority leader, McCarthy, at this press conference, and this guy, he's the embarrassment. These people know that this guy he's a village.
Kevin McCarthy is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I didn't see his press conference, so I can't comment on specifically what he said. But
he's a piece of work. But Trump is just a village idiot, and some people will call him the crackhead, the neighborhood crackhead. And I hate to use
Rudy,
that,
be careful with that. Be real careful with that, because if we underestimate, Trump is actually very, very sly. This guy, he's a con man. He's made his living as a con man for 50 years anyway, and he's very good at it.
That's what I'm saying. Very clever.
Yeah.
And see what I'm saying. The Republicans are the ones that's robbing this country. You let this guy run off. You let Trump run off and just distract everybody with all the buffoonery and everything, and Republicans are really the ones that's robbing this country.
Yeah, no, and it's almost like they planned it this way. Hey, let's put a reality TV star. I mean, it was Reagan. Reagan was a TV star. Let's put an actor in, and then they'll distract everybody, and we'll just rob the country blind. And of course, Reagan tripled the national debt by cutting taxes from 91% down, or from 74% down to 25%. Rudy, thanks.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back. It's 47 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Carol in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Two things. First, are you sure despair is not an option?
Yes, despair is not an option. Despair is paralyzing.
Oh, well, I'm so upset by the Republicans' refusal to stop supporting a man as sick as Donald Trump is. I mean, he's permanently damaged in a very unusual way, and he's growing worse daily. And I really fear for the country if he is not removed after the impeachment. I don't know where we would go from there, because this man will be emboldened if he's let go. He will do whatever it takes. He's already dismantling our democracy.
Yes, I agree.
And I happened to see a psychiatrist on Lawrence O'Donnell's show the other night. Did you happen to catch that?
No, I usually I'm in bed when Lawrence comes on the air. Louise and I watch Rachel, and then we go to bed. Because we get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do show prep.
He gave a great analysis of the president about how he's really a psychopath. Mm-hmm. He's a malignant narcissist. He has no love for God or man. He's never going to change. It's not curable, what he has. Right. And he's growing worse every day. And that's very frightening, to think that the Republicans in Congress are willing to overlook a man who is probably the most dangerous president we've ever had. Well, I don't understand it.
You know, they did the same thing with Nixon when they knew that Nixon was committing crimes. They knew that he was taking, it was an open secret that Nixon was taking bribes. Hell, it was an open secret that Nixon was taking bribes in 1959 when he was vice president.
That's true. Well, what about? I would like to add one more to your list of impeachable offenses. Mm-hmm. What about his human rights abuses? What about ripping children from their parents' arms and locking them up?
Yeah, kids in cages.
How evil is this man?
Yeah, and having an open out white supremacist as his senior advisor, Stephen Miller, in the White House, writing his speeches. This is the guy who wrote his American Carnage speech, his inaugural address. You know, and it's breathtaking. It
is breathtaking.
That this is happening.
It's frightening and breathtaking.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we will recover if he is let go after this impeachment. I see him becoming so emboldened, so sure that he can have his way.
I agree.
That he will sell out this country.
And that's,
he would sell out his mother.
I absolutely agree. And that's why I think that even if he's not removed from office, we need to have a documentary record of the crimes that he has committed. And that indictment by the House of Representatives, even if it's only unipartisan, even if not a single Republican votes for it, that indictment by the House of Representatives becomes a part of the historical record that says this is behavior we will not tolerate. Now, we may ultimately, the Republicans may ultimately say, yes, we will tolerate it, but at least half of the country is on record as saying, no, shouldn't be this way. And
what is your explanation for why they are willing to go along with a man as crazy as this one?
Because he's giving the billionaires what they want. They want deregulation and tax cuts, and Donald Trump is shoveling both at them. And so the billionaires are still supportive of Donald Trump. When the billionaires decide to get off the train, then the Republicans will follow along. But right now, the entire Republican Party is basically a wholly owned subsidiary of the oligarchy in the United States. Carol, thank you for the call. We'll be right back with more of our conversation here. Stick around. Welcome back. 52 minutes past the hour. Liz in Los Angeles. Hey, Liz, what's on your mind?
Hi. As to the value of education, I worked in the court system for a long time, and a lot of the judges, the older judges, all were GIs in World War II and got their education through the GI Bill.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, up until 10, 15 years ago, as my dad's generation is dying off now, or at least retiring, but up until 10, 15, 20 years ago, probably, I don't know if it would be a majority or not, And I probably should look up the numbers. You know, what percentage of college students in the United States from 1947 or whenever the GI Bill was passed until I think it was 64 was the year it ran out. What percentage of college students during that period of time were going to school on the GI Bill? But it's got to be huge. And I think in every industry, I mean, NASA, a lot of NASA scientists. I remember when, you know, Apollo happened and we put a man on the moon, you know, and there was talk about NASA scientists who got their science degrees on the GI Bill. So, yeah, spot on. Liz, thank you for that. Rob in Chico, California says you want to disagree with me, Rob? What's up?
No, I do not want to disagree with you. I've called before you. I'm conservative, much more conservative, probably closer to an anarchist than a conservative. But I wanted to comment on something Nancy Pelosi said in her press conference, see if you agree or your listeners agree. And it was scary to me, in referring to the slowing down of this thing or speeding up. She said, and this is a quote, "The president's actions in sending all these, taking these actions to court and then bumping them up in court is an obstruction of justice."
Right.
Seeking a remedy in court, for me, if it's me, and you want to say I'm obstructing justice by taking my legal remedy,
yeah,
that's a scary statement, frankly.
Yeah, I get it, Rob, and I can't, on its surface, I can't disagree with that. You know, the fact of the matter is that Richard Nixon, I would say that the obstruction of justice here is not with Trump, it's with Bill Barr. Richard Nixon argued before the Supreme Court that he wouldn't have to turn over the White House tapes, and the Supreme Court said, sorry, you're being impeached. The House of Representatives has sole power over impeachment. You have to do what they say. Bill Clinton tried to say that he didn't have to go to that deposition in the Paula Jones case because he was president of the United States and he was busy. And the Supreme Court said, no, you have to do this. So there is precedent there, and there is law to be enforced. And you would think that, and there's basically, you know, that you have inherent contempt, civil contempt, and criminal contempt. And Congress has tried to refer some of these things out for criminal contempt, but Bill Barr won't take them. Bill Barr will not hold Trump or anybody in his administration accountable under existing Supreme Court precedents. So they're having to go back to the courts and work their way up through the courts. And so, you know, I understand what you're saying, Rob. I absolutely do. And I would like to see this handled more vigorously. I'm not, you know, I don't have an instant answer for exactly how, but, you know, I think that we really should be paying attention to precedent. Bill in Sebastian, Florida. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Yeah, good afternoon, Tom.
Hey, Bill.
I don't know if you saw Matt Gaetz the other night when Trump was in Miami. He called him boss on stage.
Oh, really?
You know,
no, I didn't see it.
Oh, yeah, he called him boss. He says, thanks a lot, boss, you know.
Yeah.
Trump gave one of his speeches. The other thing is we withdrew from the UN treaty that concerned children's rights. And that's one thing he should be impeached for, as well as the voter purges in all the states. I'm sure he was complicit with Kobach.
Well, he's not responsible for the voter purges. That's you know, I mean, he's part of a party.
He knew about what was going on. I would think he knew what was going on.
Yeah, but I don't think you can impeach him specifically for it. I agree, it's a crime. In fact, I wrote a book about it that'll be coming out in the spring. It's called the Hidden History of the War on Voting. I'm with you, but.
All right, one more thing, Tom.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mentioned that Greg Palast and Stacey Abrams are in that court action down there in Georgia on C-SPAN this morning, which I think is paramount in our fight for decency in this country.
Yeah.
All right, then. Thanks, Tom.
I'm with you, Bill. Thanks a lot for the call. And you know, voter suppression, I think, is a crime against democracy. And if we had a right in the Constitution to vote, in Bush v. Gore in 2000, the Supreme Court, Rehnquist's ruling, he said there is no constitutional right to vote for president. Zero. We need to put that into the Constitution.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. Free Speech TV is doing the 50-state challenge. It's starting today. It continues to December 11th. A donor has stepped up and, bless you, whoever you may be, and said they're going to make a $50,000 donation to a $10,000 donation to Free Speech TV if people in 50 states, all 50 states, one new donor in each state can be acquired or whatever. If one new person who has never before donated to Free Speech TV will pick up the phone right now and call 877-378-8669 and make a donation of any amount, $1, whatever it may be, any amount, today. Actually, it's going to run for a week or so. We'll let you know if we hit it. I think this is, just looking at this from a mathematical point of view, if you live in a state that has a small population, like Vermont with 600,000 people or Wyoming with a little over 1 million, and you have never donated to Free Speech TV before, and you are inclined to think that this is a network worth supporting, now would be a great time. Now, yeah, I mean, if you're in a big state too, but, in a state with millions and millions of people, California, I'm guessing, will get a new donor today without a problem. Although if you're in California, don't hesitate. But particularly small and medium-sized states, call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution. If we can get 50 states in on this thing, $10,000 goes to Free Speech TV. So your gift becomes much, much bigger, no matter how much your gift is. Free Speech TV is such a vital part of the American progressive media infrastructure. We need this network. We need it alive. We need it strong. We need it continuing. We need your help. We can't do it without you. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV literally does not exist without donations from our listeners. And help keep the great programming on the air that you really like, the shows that you really like, help us keep this thing going. So please call now, 877-378-8669. I realize it's the holiday season. We don't have gift cards that say, a donation has been made in your name to Free Speech TV, but you can create one. If you've got Christmas cards and you want to send a note to somebody, you want to call and make a contribution to Free Speech TV. I don't think they have a way of tracking it, but you could do it. I mean, you don't need anything from Free Speech TV to do this. Just, write in your Christmas card, I made a donate, and in fact, you could tell numerous people that you made a Free Speech TV donation in their name. It's a way of kind of spreading the word, and hopefully next holiday season we can do something like this. We did years ago, I know, and if I got a Christmas card from somebody and it said, hey, I made a donation to Free Speech TV and I'm doing it in my mind, in your name. I'm doing it in recognition of our friendship. I think that would be a cool thing. So, you can get creative. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this. But also, Free Speech TV also has, these premiums, and, we're getting pretty close to the holiday season. This is the shortest period between Thanksgiving and Christmas possible is right now. I mean, it's happening this year. So I doubt that things will be arriving before Christmas. But for example, if you wanted to give all 3 of my books to somebody, the $360 or $30 a month gift, you could send them a Christmas card saying that, you're going to be getting these because I made this donation, and when I get the books, I'll send them to you, and they're all autographed by the author. But the premiums today, the sticker Gravity is the only law Trump hasn't broken. It's $20. The tote bag, Nobody is Above the Law, that's $50. There's a $120 T-shirt gift. That would be $10 a month for a year, or just $120 up front. The online after class with Professor Thom, that's $240, or $20 a month for a year. The 3 books I mentioned earlier, that is my new book on ADHD, Hunter and a Farmer's World, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Those 3 books, $360. And a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and hang out with us, and we'll have a nice time. And just like with the $240 gift, our virtual meet and greet, our online meet and greet, whatever you want to talk about, I'm up for it. We can discuss anything. We've had some pretty wild and pretty interesting conversations in some of these meet and greets, both in person and online. But now, please call, particularly, like I said, if you're in a small or medium-sized state. But no matter where you are, if you've never donated to Free Speech TV before, today is the day. Please call now, 877-378-8669. That's 877-378-8669. You can also donate online at freespeech.org. So please call now and make.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The bomb.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is our old buddy, Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of democracyatwork.info, and rdwolff.com with 2 F's is also his website. And the author most recently of Understanding Marxism. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolff. Professor Wolff, welcome back to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
So over the weekend, I was reading your book, Understanding Marxism. And you did an absolutely marvelous job of explaining how basically, we started with kind of tyranny, essentially, and slavery, and how slavery then kind of morphed into feudalism, where instead of actually explicitly owning and micro-directing the individual people who were enslaved, in a feudal society, those people had, they were given some small portion of the land in order to grow their own food, so that the lords didn't have to care for them so directly. And then you took the step from there to capitalism, where the lords or the slave owners are now the executives in the company, shall we say. And you talked about the difference between surplus labor, I believe was your phrase, and forgive me for mangling this. It's been a few days since I read it. And the one thing that, first of all, you want to just riff on that real quickly and lay that out more clearly than I did, because I'm sure I just screwed it all up.
Not at all. I'm glad to do it. You didn't screw it up. It's really a simple idea that we've had now a long period of human history early on when things were done in tribes, in groups, in communities, in villages, which were pretty much horizontally organized, not much difference between whoever was the chief or not and everybody else. And then we had a period of more recent human history where we broke that system down into one in which there was a clear division between a minority who made all the basic decisions, economically at least, and usually politically as well, and a vast majority who had to live with them. The first of those was slavery, with the masters, a minority, controlling and dominating the majority, slaves telling them what to do and making all the decisions about the work and the products of that work. Then we went to feudalism, at least in the European sequence, where we had, again, a minority, although this time they were the feudal lords, and a majority, and this time, instead of slaves, they were the serfs. The revolutions in America and France at the end of the 18th century were supposed to bring us an era of freedom, equality, liberty, and democracy, but they didn't. What they did was bring us a change in that arrangement, but not the end of that arrangement. And so the basic idea is that the employers, a minority who make all the key decisions, what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, what to do with the output, are again in control of a majority, but they're not slaves or serfs, now they're employees. And that the name of the game is to recapture the goal of the capitalist revolution in America, in France, and so on, which was to get beyond these divisions. That wasn't achieved, and so the Marxist critique has always been, you've got to go further. You've got to make further changes if you're going to realize the shared objective of liberty, equality, fraternity, and democracy.
And I would add innovation to that. Because
and innovation that is participated in by everyone in society, rather than being a specialized task of a few subordinated to the profit demands of those who direct those few.
And that's where, I look at capitalism, and as somebody who, because of capitalism, has done well with his life. I mean, I've started and built up 5 businesses and sold them off. I've retired 5 times. And I've never considered myself somebody who exploits his employees, and in fact, none of my companies have ever really made a huge profit. The money that I always made was selling them at the end. It seems that under a slavery system or a feudal system, the people who are in charge generally by virtue of birth. They were born into a wealthy family. They were born as royalty. They were born, as feudal lords. They were the children of some warlord who took over a place. And you see some of that in a capitalist system, certainly. And this is where I think that we need to change the rules of capitalism to aggressively diminish that. But with capitalism, you can become, because you have an idea and the persistence to pursue that idea, you can achieve a modicum of success. Certainly, I'm no Bill Gates, but I mean, you can achieve a modicum of success because of innovation or talent. In other words, you can rise above DNA and lineage, or whatever the phrase would be. And it seems to me like that's the thing that has produced the vibrancy of capitalist economies over the last 200 years, and all this innovation that has happened around the world. If you agree with that analysis, if you disagree with that analysis, please tell me, and tell me how and why. If you agree with that analysis, how can we reconfigure the rules of capitalism to get more of that and less of what we see with some of these large corporations where they are run like kingdoms?
Well, I guess I half agree and half disagree. Let me try to explain. Absolutely. You can probably make a good case that capitalism has more opportunities for mobility than feudalism or slavery did. But it's only a question of degree, not of kind. The history of feudalism, like the history of slavery, is filled with examples of unusual slaves or unusual serfs who, by dint of this or that talent, of an innovation, of great physical or mental skill, were able to break out of their slave status and rise up in the system, or, for example, in some slaveries, to become masters themselves. So they had their own slaves, even though they were technically the slaves of yet a larger master above them, and you had the same thing in feudalism. Mm-hmm. But again, you can give capitalism some credit for having a bit more of that mobility. But I wouldn't take that issue too far. We all know that if you are born into the Rockefeller family, your chances all the way through life are a completely different story from the chances of a person who's born into poverty, and both of those people are born through no act of their own. That's their parents who made that decision, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the reality is, yes, but we can do much better than capitalism by making the possibility of getting a good education, having the time, getting the support to break through with new ideas and new ways of doing things. If that were a much more generalized capability than what capitalism allows. You know, I'm a graduate, went to Harvard and Yale. I'm a kind of poster boy for elite education. But I can assure you, in those institutions, I was surrounded by a clear majority of young men, in my case, because it wasn't co-ed at the time, who were there because of their families, because of the resources of their families, not because of any special talent or desire on their own part, which they freely admitted because they were often quite unhappy in this environment because it really wasn't what they were interested in, having grown up with luxury all their lives, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas for the kids from the other side of the tracks, like me, we were all hungry to get ahead because our parents had shaped us that way. But this society is heavily shaped by its inequality, and people have to face the unpleasant fact that if you build a system that is as unequal as ours, you are basically cutting off major sources of innovation and growth because of the of people who are denied the access to all the little and large steps along the way that lead to being able to make a breakthrough.
Right. So this is, I totally agree. So what I'm trying to get to is like the sweet spot, where opportunity is available, across the. I mean, when you and I grew up, within a couple of miles of probably where either one of us grew up, there were probably quite a few people who actually owned their own businesses. The local dry cleaner, the local restaurant, the local hotel, the local pharmacy, the local the local newspaper. I mean, fill in the blanks, right? The local gas station. These were all small businesses, and small businesses tend to be run in a far more humane fashion than giant corporations. And now they're all gone. I mean, you could fall out of a plane at 60,000 feet and land anywhere, any random place in America, and look around and see, oh, there's an Olive Garden, there's a Holiday Inn, I have no idea where the hell I am. So, returning some sense of locality of small business to America, which would be aggressively enforcing antitrust laws, and B, having a social safety net that so everybody can have education and healthcare and all those kind of things. So there's not, you don't have a desperate workforce. And then C, building incentives in the tax structure and corporation laws to have more beneficent corporations, more cooperative corporations, rather than purely hierarchical corporations. Is that a middle ground that's viable, or are you suggesting that we just full on should say, no, Karl Marx was absolutely right. Just wipe the whole thing, clean the table.
Well, I really do. I'm not being rhetorical here. I wish the middle ground were something that I could believe in. I mean, it is possible. We do have an antitrust division. There was a time in America at the end of the 19th century with the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, and all of those steps which showed that there were mass political movements effective enough to get the laws passed. But the way capitalism works is they fight against all of these kinds of restrictions. If they lose that fight, which occasionally they do, okay, then the law gets passed, and then they go to work to eviscerate the law, to get it amended, to get it not enforced, and then eventually when they can pull it the final step, to get it repealed so that it doesn't have any force, and we start the whole crazy cycle again. So I'm a little bit historically skeptical of the ability to make a durable arrangement of the sort you suggest. If we could, I'd go in that direction, but because the other side has been so successful in undoing the efforts we've made, I tend to lead to the more, to end up in the more sweeping position. We really have to make a fundamental shift.
Yeah, I understand. I absolutely understand. The book, Understanding Marxism, Professor Richard Wolff. Professor, thanks for dropping by again.
Thank you, Tom. Look forward to our next call.
Me too.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back. You can check out Professor Wolff's work over at rdwolff.com or democracyatwork.info. The book we were discussing, Understanding Marxism. And welcome back. Brandon in Seattle. Hey, Brandon, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Good to talk with you this morning. I had a couple grounds for impeachment that came to mind, and the first two were actually First Amendment violations. Respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof is one that the Constitution bars. And the
so
First
what specific
Amendment,
act did Trump, I get his rhetoric, but what specific act that he has done would you say is so severe that it's impeachable in that context?
Yeah, so remember when he had the travel ban on 6 different Muslim countries, which he initiated, advocated for, and oversaw.
Right, religious travel ban.
In my opinion, would clearly be, a violation. And the second, First Amendment, which bars abridging the freedom of the press. Think about Trump labeling the press enemy of the people, choosing who he invites into the news conference based on whether they've given him good coverage or not,
Yeah.
That's another violation that I would say.
Yeah, those are, I agree with you. But I'm not sure that as standalone articles, either of those would be strong enough. But I think that they could be aggregated along with a half a dozen other things that kind of fall into that category. Trash talking America, trash talking the other, the opposite political party in ways that are inflammatory, encouraging violence by police. Encouraging violence by right-wing paramilitaries. I think those all could fall into one large umbrella category, which is essentially maladministration, which is a high crime or misdemeanor. The failure to run the government in a way that is consistent with the values of America. I'm making notes here.
I totally agree. I totally agree with your viewpoint on why aren't we, widening this look at everything that he's done. Just a couple of months ago, we had a federal judge that ruled that Trump violated federal law when he used the declaration of a national emergency to get money for building the wall on the southern border. That's another one,
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. But,
go ahead. During the, I did get to see some of the impeachment hearing yesterday, and I thought it was kind of funny that all these Republicans were saying, comparing to other impeachments, about how during this one there's absolutely no Republicans that are voting yes in regards to it. But, back then I think there was more bipartisanship as far as, caring about the way that the country works. And it just seems like there's so much corruption now on both sides that it's hard to escape it.
Yeah. This and for much of that, sadly, Brandon, we can look at the Supreme Court. When in 1976 and 1978, when the Supreme Court betrayed this country and legalized political bribery in the Buckley and First National Bank decisions, and then when they doubled down on that with Citizens United, tripled down with it in McCutcheon and McDonald. They changed the rules of the game. It's as if the NFL said, whichever team has the most money can have the most players on the field, and so we've got this corrupted political system. I think that we need to keep in mind the original causes of this, though, and that is conservatives on the Supreme Court. Brandon, thank you for the call. Well said. We'll be right back. It's 22 minutes past the hour and change. So our special Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The hidden history of the Supreme Court and the betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We've been compiling articles of impeachment for Donald Trump and discussing whether he should go wide. Whether the United States House of Representatives, in their articles of impeachment, so far as expressed by Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Chairman Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler, whether they should go wide or whether they should go narrow and deep. And I think they should go wide and deep, frankly. And I think that they should be holding hearings on all kinds of things. I would love to see Ways and Means holding a hearing on Trump's taxes. I would love to see, Homeland Security holding hearings on white supremacist violence in the United States. I would love to see, I'm not sure which agency would fall under, doing hearings, probably Homeland Security, doing hearings into Trump putting children in cages. 70,000 families have been separated. There's an estimated between 7,000 and 20,000 children right now that are just like in the system, and thousands of them have already been lost, probably will never be found. When Stephen Miller decided to pursue this brutal, cruel, vicious policy directed at children from another country simply because their skin was darker than his, when Stephen Miller decided to do that, and Donald Trump was like, yeah, let's do this, and John Kelly was like, yeah, let's do this, and then John Kelly goes to be on the board and taking big paychecks from one of these private prison corporations that's keeping these kids in cages, or their parents. When all that happened, frankly, I think these things are crimes. These are crimes against humanity. And we shouldn't have to wait for, The Hague to point it out. I mean, it should just be, this is not how Americans conduct themselves. This is not how American government should be run. And in my opinion, impeachment serves multiple purposes. Obviously, the one everybody knows about is it's a way of extracting the president from the office of the presidency and replacing him with a vice president. And by the way, let me refer you to Sherrod Brown's wife, Connie Schultz, who just wrote a brilliant piece about Mike Pence. And just, what a horror, what a freak show Mike Pence is. And we'll talk about that later on in the program, either today or tomorrow. But in addition to removing the president, which has never happened, impeachment serves a much larger purpose in defining our values. It's like a statement of purpose. It's a reaffirmation of our Constitution and the values that animated it. And I realize that many of those values have to this day have not been perfectly acted out, and certainly for the first 100 years of our history or more were badly acted out. But there are some core values here that we have to hold to.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So we'll be back with your calls on that and, your thoughts on capitalism and socialism and communism and Professor Wolff's thoughts right after this. Speech TV is doing the 50-state challenge. It's starting today. It continues to December 11th. A donor has stepped up and, bless you, whoever you may be, and said they're going to make a $50,000 donation to a $10,000 donation to Free Speech TV if people in 50 states, all 50 states, one new donor in each state can be acquired or whatever, if one new person who has never before donated to Free Speech TV will pick up the phone right now and call 877-378-8669 and make a donation of any amount, $1, whatever it may be, any amount, today. Actually, it's going to run for a week or so. We'll let you know if we hit it. I think this is, just looking at this from a mathematical point of view, if you live in a state that has a small population, like Vermont with 600,000 people or Wyoming with a little over 1 million, and you have never donated to Free Speech TV before, and you are inclined to think that this is a network worth supporting, now would be a great time. Now, yeah, I mean, if you're in a big state too, but, in a state with millions and millions of people, California, I'm guessing, will get a new donor today without a problem. Although if you're in California, don't hesitate. But particularly small and medium-sized states, call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution. If we can get 50 states in on this thing, $10,000 goes to Free Speech TV. So your gift becomes much, much bigger, no matter how much your gift is. Free Speech TV is such a vital part of the American progressive media infrastructure. We need this network. We need it alive. We need it strong. We need it continuing. We need your help. We can't do it without you. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV literally does not exist without donations from our listeners. And help keep the great programming on the air that you really like, the shows that you really like, help us keep this thing going. So please call now, 877-378-8669. I realize it's the holiday season. We don't have gift cards that say, a donation has been made in your name to Free Speech TV, but you can create one. If you've got Christmas cards and you want to send a note to somebody, you want to call and make a contribution to Free Speech TV. I don't think they have a way of tracking it, but you could do it. I mean, you don't need anything from Free Speech TV to do this. Just, write in your Christmas card, I made a donate. And in fact, you could tell numerous people that you made a Free Speech TV donation in their name. It's a way of kind of spreading the word. And, hopefully next holiday season, we can do something like this. We did years ago, I know. And if I got a Christmas card from somebody and it said, hey, I made a donation to Free Speech TV and I'm doing it in my mind, in your name. I'm doing it in recognition of our friendship. I think that would be a cool thing. So, you can get creative. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this. But also, Free Speech TV also has, these premiums. And, we're getting pretty close to the holiday season. This is the shortest period between Thanksgiving and Christmas possible is right now. I mean, it's happening this year. So I doubt that things will be arriving before Christmas. But for example, if you wanted to give all 3 of my books to somebody, the $360 or $30 a month gift, you could send them a Christmas card saying that, you're going to be getting these because I made this donation. And when I get the books, I'll send them to you. And they're all autographed by the author. But the premiums today, the sticker, Gravity, is the only law Trump hasn't broken. It's $20. The tote bag, Nobody is Above the Law, that's $50. There's a $120 T-shirt gift. That would be $10 a month for a year or just $120 up front. The online after class with Professor Thom, that's $240 or $20 a month for a year. The 3 books I mentioned earlier, that is my new book on ADHD, Hunter and a Farmer's World, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Those 3 books, $360. And a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and hang out with us, and we'll have a nice time. And just like with the $240 gift, our virtual meet and greet, our online meet and greet, whatever you want to talk about, I'm up for it. We can discuss anything. We've had some some pretty wild and pretty interesting conversations in some of these meet and greets, both in person and online. But now, please call, particularly, like I said, if you're in a small or medium-sized state. But no matter where you are, if you've never donated to Free Speech TV before, today is the day. Please call now, 877-378-8669. That's 877-378-8669. You can also donate online at freespeech.org. So please call now and make.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And there's more. You can find it now wherever fine podcasts are available, and it's free. More info at thomhartmann.com or over on our Facebook page. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Barry in Concord, North Carolina. Hey, Barry, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening to SiriusXM.
All right, Tom, I listen to you religiously. I'm a moderate conservative, and I just wanted to ask you to do one thing. When you mentioned the word free, and you refer to the countries of Finland, Denmark, Sweden, countries that are civilized, you also need to tell your audience that these people, these citizens of these countries, pay anywhere between 60 and 70% of their income in taxes to have free stuff. So free comes with a price, and I think you owe it to your audience to bring that up. And secondly,
yeah, well, hang on just a second.
As a moderate conservative,
the average,
I support.
Wait a second. Just, I just can't let a statement that's not true stand. And I encourage you to do your homework on this, Barry. We did our show for 2 weeks from Denmark. I don't think the tax laws have changed much in the 4 or 5 years since we did our show from there. I had a whole bunch of Danish politicians on, the majority of them conservatives, and in fact, I think I only had 2 or 3 politicians that I agreed with on the program, or that that would consider themselves progressives or liberals. In Denmark, if you are working at McDonald's, the minimum wage there is $18.50 an hour, as I recall. Yes, they pay more in taxes, but and the top, more or less, the top tax rate for people in the upper middle class is around 54%. The average tax rate for people in the middle class is around 35%. And at the very top end, the taxes can go up to 80% or more if you're, after you make your first $2 or $3 or $4 million. I don't remember the exact numbers. But the point is that for working people, regardless of the top tax rate or regardless of the tax rate that's paid, working people are paid based on take-home pay. So in the United States, for example, every time there has been a tax cut on working people in the United States, and you can go back over, and I've written several articles about this, you can easily Google, and I'm not the only one. And there's entire books on economics, that are devoted to this. Go back over the last 50 years in the United States. Whenever taxes on working people have gone down, so has pay in the subsequent years, in the 3 years following. Why? Because the employers know that the working people have more money in their pockets as a consequence of their after-tax income going up because their taxes went down. And the consequence of that is that the employers dial them back because they know what people are willing to work for. That is to say, they know what the wage, what a particular job, what the average pay is for a particular job. On the other hand, when taxes on working people go up, and again, look at the history of the United States, because you will find that they've gone both up and down. When taxes on working people go up, wages go up because their take-home pay has shrunk and they can't work for that job any longer at that pay. And now that rule, which, most people, just common sense and logic would indicate that that's how it works. And in fact, that is how it works. That's why in Denmark, they pay $18.54 or 45 cents an hour, whatever it is, at McDonald's, as starting wage at McDonald's. In Germany, starting wage for McDonald's is around $14 an hour because they've got high taxes too, but they're not as high as Denmark's. Here in the United States, starting wage at McDonald's is probably 10 or 15 bucks. I think they've increased it somewhat in the last 3 or 4 years, but up in probably 5-6 years ago, it was $7 an hour. So, but with no taxes. Now, let me just put one codicil on this, and then you can talk all you want. The other point, though, is for people who have control over their own wage, for the rich, for the very wealthy, for the CEOs, for people who live on investments, for people who have control over their own wages, whether taxes go up or down does not have much effect on their wage. Because they can control their wages. So for the top, say, 5 or 10% of the economically of people, when taxes go down, their take home goes up, and it stays up, and because they're not operating in a marketplace unless they're at the junior executive level, and when taxes go up, their take home pay goes down, and that's why 40 years ago, before Reagan dropped the top tax rate from 74% to 25% in the 1980s. Before the 1980s, average CEOs in the United States from the 1930s until the 1980s took 30 times what their lowest paid employee took on average. Right now, it's around 600 times what the lowest paid employee takes. Why? Because the top tax rate went down. It used to be on your first $2-3 million in today's dollars, you would pay 25, 35, 45%, and then it started going above 50%. When it started going above 50%, people said, okay, I'll cap my salary at that level, and we'll reinvest this money in the business. And then once Reagan dropped that top tax rate below 50%, those people just started saying, hey, I'm going to take all I can get. And what do you have? An explosion of income inequality and wealth inequality. And essentially, it's very corrosive. It's destructive to society. Now, to you, Barry.
All right. Well, Tom, I think you kind of missed my point here is that the people there in those countries, I have visited these countries, spent time talking to them. I've talked to school teachers. I've talked to people who work there. And these people pay a back in Finland. I'm just using those 3 or 4 countries there. These people pay a base tax of anywhere from 30 to 35%, and then they have a 25% VAT tax in most all of those countries. So the real tax rate that they pay is somewhere between 60 and 68%. I've also called the tax administration in Finland and Denmark and got them to verify, and at one time they told me the tax rate was 72% in Denmark.
That would be the top marginal rate.
So these people are paying a tax. Now, you ask the people who live there, how do you feel about cradle-to-grave care for your education, Medicare? They say, a school teacher told me, well, we're the 4th generation, so we're used to it. So we're used to paying 62% or 64% in taxes. So, but
you know how much Finland pays their teachers, Barry?
Do I?
Finland pays their teachers and their police, by the way. They pay them about the same as they pay their doctors. Teachers, police, and doctors all make a little over $100,000 a year in Finland.
That's fine. I don't question that. You can. I'm just
after taxes, they're taking home $50,000 a year.
States, you have to put a price tag on this for the citizens of the United States. Right. In order for us to have free education and free medical, there's going to be a cost involved. There's no such thing as free.
You're right.
That's my point. So, but anyway.
Right. And but secondly, you've got right now, Barry, here in the United States, because Reagan dropped that top tax rate below 50%, you have 3 men who own as much wealth as the bottom half of the United States. As 180 million people, you got 3 men who own as much wealth as the bottom half of the United States.
I don't disagree with that.
You've got 600 people who own as much wealth as the bottom 90% of the United States.
I find that true. All right. Secondly, I just wanted to tell you I will not be voting for Donald Trump. I'm a moderate conservative who supports some sort of universal health care for all citizens of the United States and willing to pay a price for that. So I support raising Social Security tax to pay the citizens who are retaring a decent wage. So I am a moderate conservative. I'm not.
Well, I tip my hat to you, Barry. I tip my hat to you. Thank you. Thanks for the call. I thought that was a very enlightening call. I appreciate it. Kathy in Valparaiso, Indiana. Hey, Kathy, what's up?
Hi, Mr. Hartman.
Hey.
I'm going back to when you first started your show. You did the commercial for the Bidens.
Mm-hmm.
I come up with an idea, and I wanted to run it by you, but I thought it would be great for anybody that's running in the Democratic Party. Why don't they get the people together of those businesses that Trump stiffened, the construction workers, and have them do a commercial on what it did to their lives, what it did to their businesses. Put faces to his corruption.
Yeah, we're seeing manufacturing. By the way, the manufacturing numbers came out a couple days ago, and it's one of the reasons the market's been going down, because manufacturing in the United States is actually on a decline now. It was increasing for a while.
Right, but I'm talking about what he personally did with his businesses when he did the casinos.
Oh, you're talking about
like
get Trump's employees. Yeah, that there was an effort to do that in 2016. There were some ads to that effect in 2016 of people who got hurt by Donald Trump. Employees of his who got screwed. And I remember one contractor who had built cabinets and furniture for his New Jersey casino who never got paid. Who I believe did an ad. Maybe it was a PSA or something. But that's a great suggestion, Kathy. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. David in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, David, what's up?
Well, it's nice to hear from a thoughtful Republican.
It is. I appreciate thoughtful Republicans. My dad was one.
I do too. I remember, and I appreciate it. And it's good to hear that they're out there. I thought they were an endangered species. But based on today's conversation, I have 2 quick points to make and a question. First of all, we must go wide. It is the very foundation of the modern plea bargain system that you've taught us about, where the government throws the book at you and you plea bargain down to a reasonable thing, and the Republicans can always excuse away 1 or 2. We're listening to them do it.
You're right. That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
And thank you. Number 2 is I'm part of a Facebook group with conservatives and liberals, and we argue back and forth on all the issues, and they're totally propagandized by Fox News. And I asked them, do you really want a future Democratic president to do what Trump is doing right now, the obstruction and the whole deal? Crickets, Tom. I keep asking them over and over again. They will not respond to that question, which suggests to me that they know what he's doing is wrong and they don't care.
I think that's true, David. There's a tribal element to this, and there's also, of course, the billionaires behind this thing that are, as long as we get our deregulation and our tax cuts, we don't care what this guy does.
Quick question. How can the feds investigate Giuliani and the New York taxes if Bill Barr is head of the Fed? I don't understand that.
Well, it's interesting because I almost said that in response to something you said earlier, that they should be impeaching Bill Barr at the same time they're impeaching Trump, in my opinion. He is not enforcing the law, which is his job. David, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's talk media for the sane among us. The Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back. Stick around. And welcome back. Rich in Stowe, Vermont. Woo! You must have some snow there. It's been a while since I've been to Stowe.
A little bit.
So how's it? What's up, Rich?
Hey, Tom. So here's my proposition. I want to see what you think.
Okay.
And it's in the spirit of taking a page out of the Republican playbook, and that is, you label somebody, and now you can attack them relentlessly because they have a label. So if all this evidence against Trump for impeachment is irrefutable, if we come to the conclusion it's irrefutable, and the Senate Republicans are going to vote to not impeach him, all of them, is it fair that we label them the gang of traitors?
I think that we need to be very careful about our use of language, Rich. I'm not afraid to use the word treason, but I always put it in context. This is, treason against the Constitution or treason against the values of our country. But treason against our country itself is giving aid and comfort to the enemy during time of war. And I think that if that word is to have the impact that it has historically had, we need to preserve it. I'm perfectly content to say that they are operating in a political arena that is way beyond the realm of American values. They're not reflecting American values. They are reflecting the values of autocratic governments, of dictatorial governments, of kleptocratic governments. But I'm not comfortable with traitor and treason.
I appreciate that answer. It helps me out.
Okay.
But so continuing though, is there, since they are so effective at labeling and those labels stick and it's a target that they create that's really effective, is there a label that would be more accurate to label the Senate Republicans if and when the time comes?
Well, they're betraying American values. They are acting in a way that's not consistent with the Constitution. Is not. I mean, right now, Mitch McConnell just came out a couple days ago, or just a couple hours ago, rather, and said that if he and Chuck Schumer can't work out rules for how they're going to run the Senate trial, then he'll just make up his own rules. Him and 51 Republicans. When Clinton was impeached, they came up with, and Republicans, I believe, were running the Senate at the time. They came up with a set of rules, and the vote on the rules was 100-0 to define, who can do what. McConnell literally has it in his power to say, okay, one of the rules in the Senate is that only Republicans get to speak. Only Republicans get to ask questions. Now, I doubt he'll go that far. But, the Senate operates under rules that the Senate defines for itself, and there's nothing in the Constitution that says what those rules have to be. Or specifically, I mean, broadly, majority rules kind of things. But I don't believe that Mitch McConnell is committed to anything that resembles a fair process in the Senate trial. And when this gets to be a Senate trial, I have a feeling we're going to be pulling our hair out as much as we are right now over how the Republicans are acting in the House. But we'll see. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Rich, thanks a lot for the call. Good to hear from you, and enjoy the snow there in Vermont. We don't get much of it here in Portland, Oregon. I miss it. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I got another email from Donald Trump. Fred, did you watch yesterday's impeachment hearing scam? Jerry Nadler is a hypocrite and a fraud. This is pretty strong language. I had a caller a few minutes ago who was saying, should we call these guys traitors? And I said, no, I think we should really reserve the word for people who actually give aid and comfort to the enemy during time of war. But anyhow, back to Trump. He said the same man who once said that impeachment was telling people that their votes don't count now wants to make sure your vote, Fred, doesn't count by pushing this bogus impeachment scam. Democrats have not produced 1 ounce of evidence that I did anything wrong. Really? But they still insist on wasting more of your taxpayer money on this impeachment witch hunt. My phone call was perfect. That's not how I read it. I read it as a crime. Anyhow, he goes on to say, we can't sit back and do nothing, and that's why I'm calling on my most loyal supporters like you to step up and defend me against these fake impeachment hearings. Defend our elections and defend your freedom. Note, if you've saved your payment information, your donation will go through immediately. Please contribute $42 to the official impeachment hearing defense fund before 11:59 tonight to fight back against this fake impeachment scam. And then there's little buttons: contribute $42, contribute $250, contribute $100, contribute $50. Good grief. One of the things they have stopped doing is, for a long time, they were saying, you will be flown with, to have dinner with the president. And Judd Legum dug into this and found that they'd been running this contest for several years. Have dinner with Donald Trump. And they had never given anybody dinner with Donald Trump, which is pretty bizarre. John in Langley, Washington. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I've been listening to Tom Wolff and the Republican person that talked about.
You mean Richard Wolff?
Richard. I'm sorry. Yes, Richard Wolff.
Tom was the author.
That's right. I get mixed up. But we're talking about money and how and how we're going to pay for things. That the other person called in about how we're going to pay for all things like in Sweden. Right. Well, what struck me there is that our currency is a fiat currency, which means it's on the full faith and credit of the people of the United States. And our Federal Reserve, which is a private institution, is constantly flooding the banks with money for overnight rates because banks won't lend to each other. But we have that money that they're willing to give to prop up things. We never discussed that is full faith and credit of the people. So if we invested in Medicare for all and education, like you were saying earlier, it's already our money. We seem to be able to print it at will to give it to people. So why do we continue to let the other side talk about how we're going to pay for it? That should not be an issue at all.
Setting aside a long, drawn-out discussion of modern monetary theory, the bottom line here is that when you invest in people, when you invest in infrastructure, go back and look at the Eisenhower highway bill. When you invest in people, go back and look at the GI Bill. You actually make more money in taxes than you spent on the original investment. Now, it takes some time for that money to come back, but when it comes back in a big way over a long period of time. And we basically stopped investing in America when Reagan dropped the top tax rate. He also dropped corporate taxes. During the Eisenhower administration, fully 1/3 of all government expenses were paid for by corporate taxes. Today, it's less than 6%. And this is the result of Reaganism, of the changes that Reagan made to our tax code. And so instead, Reagan was like, well, let's start putting everything on the country's credit card, essentially. Let's put it all in the debt. He tripled the national debt while he was president. And the theory was that whenever Republicans in office, a very important job for them to do. The Jude Wanniski came up with this theory, he called it the two Santa Clauses theory. Their job is to run up the debt so that when a Democrat becomes president, all the Republicans can start screaming about the debt and force the Democrat to cut social spending. And they've been following this script literally to the T since 1980. I mean, Jude Wanniski came up with it in the late 70s. Jude's no longer with us, but the two Santa Claus theory still is. So
that's the political side.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, John.
I'm talking about the monetary policy of that it's our money.
No, I get that. Yes, and we issue our own currency, and in theory we could even, because the Constitution gives the U.S. Treasury the power to mint coins, right, and to define their value. The U.S. Treasury could produce 20 $1 trillion platinum coins, and then hand those coins off to the Federal Reserve and say, or to itself essentially, and say, okay, we're going to pay off the national debt. The problem is you don't want to pay off the national debt. The national debt of the United States has only been paid off once. It was in, as I recall, 1836 during the presidency of Andrew Jackson. And it might have been a little earlier than that, but it produced a 6-year-long depression. It was the longest, deepest, and most destructive depression in the history of the United States. And it came about because he paid off the national debt. The national debt is private savings. When you as a family go into debt, and this is where this whole, the family model falls apart. If you as a family go into debt, it just means some bank is making profit off you. But when our country goes into debt, it means that people, companies, and even foreign countries have a safe place to invest their money. That's private savings. That's the national debt. So the national debt is not a terrible thing. I mean, there's certain levels at which it becomes unwieldy, and you don't want to be paying too much interest on it, which is the main reason not to have a large national debt, because it sucks up money from other places. But yeah, you're absolutely right, John. And with a fiat currency, you can do those things. As I said, that gets into modern monetary theory, and we probably should get back into that one of these days. It's been a long time since we've had one of these good academic discussions of how economics works.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. Free Speech TV is doing the 50-state challenge. It's starting today. It continues to December 11th. A donor has stepped up and, bless you, whoever you may be, and said they're going to make a $50,000 donation to a $10,000 donation to Free Speech TV if people in 50 states, all 50 states, one new donor in each state can be acquired or whatever. If one new person who has never before donated to Free Speech TV will pick up the phone right now and call 877-378-8669 and make a donation of any amount, $1, whatever it may be, any amount today. Actually, it's going to run for a week or so. We'll let you know if we hit it. I think this is, just looking at this from a mathematical point of view, if you live in a state that has a small population, like Vermont with 600,000 people or Wyoming with a little over 1 million, and you have never donated to Free Speech TV before, and you are inclined to think that this is a network worth supporting, now would be a great time. Now, yeah, I mean, if you're in a big state too, but, in a state with millions and millions of people, California, I'm guessing, will get a new donor today without a problem. Although if you're in California, don't hesitate. But particularly small and medium-sized states, call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution. If we can get 50 states in on this thing, $10,000 goes to Free Speech TV. So your gift becomes much, much bigger, no matter how much your gift is. Free Speech TV is such a vital part of the American progressive media infrastructure. We need this network. We need it alive. We need it strong. We need it continuing. We need your help. We can't do it without you. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV literally does not exist without donations from our listeners. And help keep the great programming on the air that you really like, the shows that you really like, help us keep this thing going. So please call now, 877-378-8669. I realize it's the holiday season. We don't have gift cards that say, a donation has been made in your name to Free Speech TV, but you can create one. If you've got Christmas cards and you want to send a note to somebody, you want to call and make a contribution to Free Speech TV. I don't think they have a way of tracking it, but you could do it. I mean, you don't need anything from Free Speech TV to do this. Just, write in your Christmas card, I made a donate, and in fact, you could tell numerous people that you made a Free Speech TV donation in their name. It's a way of kind of spreading the word, and hopefully next holiday season we can do something like this. We did years ago, I know, and if I got a Christmas card from somebody and it said, hey, I made a donation to Free Speech TV and I'm doing it in my mind, in your name. I'm doing it in recognition of our friendship. I think that would be a cool thing. So, you can get creative. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this. But also, Free Speech TV also has, these premiums, and, we're getting pretty close to the holiday season. This is the shortest period between Thanksgiving and Christmas possible is right now. I mean, it's happening this year. So I doubt that things will be arriving before Christmas. But for example, if you wanted to give all 3 of my books to somebody, the $360 or $30 a month gift, you could send them a Christmas card saying that, you know, you're going to be getting these because I made this donation, and when I get the books, I'll send them to you, and they're all autographed by the author. But the premiums today, the sticker Gravity is the only law Trump hasn't broken. It's $20. The tote bag, Nobody's Above the Law, that's $50. There's a $120 T-shirt gift. That would be $10 a month for a year, or just $120 up front. The online after class with Professor Thom, that's $240, or $20 a month for a year. The 3 books I mentioned earlier, that is my new book on ADHD, Hunter and a Farmer's World, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Those 3 books, $360. And a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and hang out with us, and we'll have a nice time. And just like with the $240 gift, our virtual meet and greet, our online meet and greet, you know, whatever you want to talk about, I'm up for it. You know, we can discuss anything. We've had some pretty wild and pretty interesting conversations in some of these meet and greets, both in person and online. But now, please call, particularly, like I said, if you're in a small or medium-sized state. But no matter where you are, if you've never donated to Free Speech TV before, today is the day. Please call now, 877-378-8669. That's 877-378-8669. You can also donate online at freespeech.org. So please call now and make.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You need to know this. Crop diversity is at risk, and there are some just extraordinary people out there working to I'd say, in a way, save the world. This is a absolutely remarkable story. Barry Bonglum is with us, technical specialist with the Global Crop Diversity Trust, based out of Bonn, Germany. CropTrust.org is the website. And Barry, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Tom.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm reading this. I've read this story about how these wild seed collectors are going around the world. So far, you've collected 370 different varieties of seeds in order to deal with the lack of genetic diversity in our seed crops, in the food that in our crops that makes them vulnerable to climate change. Can you explain that?
Yes, just to correct your statement, we collected 371 species and subspecies of wild relatives. So this is a global effort to rescue endangered crop wild relatives by collecting them from the wild, conserving them, and preparing them for use in pre-breeding. And this particular part of the project, it lasted for 6 years. But it is important to note that this is part of a bigger 10-year project that was funded by the Norwegian government, and it is aimed at adapting agriculture to climate change. We call it, in short, the Crop Wild Relative Project.
Wow. Some of the stories that I saw, collectors in Nepal traveling on elephants to ward off tigers and rhinos, and they found a species of wild rice that's resistant to bacterial blight, and a relative of the sweet potato that's resistant to insect attacks and can grow in salty soils. In Ecuador, collectors wore long plastic boots with metal tips to protect them from snake bites while finding another high-yield rice. These are extraordinary stories. Where do you find folks to do this?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Thank you. As we all know, climate change is really knocking at our doors, and we need to adapt our crops to climate change. And we know that the genetic diversity in the cultivated crops is already very narrow because the history of agriculture is long. Over the years, as farmers have sculpted out the domesticated crops from the wild, they lost a lot of genetic diversity. And now with climate change, they are not really able to cope with changes such as the diseases, the pests, and so on. So we need to bring in new diversity. And this diversity, the best way of bringing it in this new diversity is from the wild relatives, because the wild relatives are the richest source of untapped genetic diversity that we are going to need to confront climate change. Wild relatives, they have these novel traits that enable them to be able to cope in adverse conditions. And we really believe that these novel traits can be brought in to the backgrounds of cultivated crops used to produce varieties that are more resilient and can stand the test of time.
Would a way to describe this be accurate if I were to say that basically the process of producing domesticated crops is selecting, and it's what we've been doing for 10,000 years since the agricultural revolution, is selecting seed crops that are as ideally suited as possible to the balance between the current environmental conditions, the current soil conditions, the current local conditions with regard to pests and fungus and insects and everything else that are the most likely to survive and then have high yields that are the most likely to survive through that. But and because of that, we've settled on just a few dozen or a few hundred individual species that provide the bulk of our food, particularly at a local level. But as climate change is altering weather and bringing pests that these plants might not have seen before, whether they be bacterial or fungal or insect, bringing growing seasons that are different, bringing different levels of moisture in the soil or a lack of moisture in the soil, that our seed crops lack the genetic diversity to be able to adapt to these new climates, and that's why y'all are out there in the wilds looking for edible plants or subsets of the main edible plants that we eat, like yams and rice and things, that do have that genetic diversity that can fit into these newly created, essentially, ecological niches that are caused by climate change. Is that an accurate way of defining it or explaining it?
Perfect. That would be an accurate way of defining it. If you would imagine wild relatives, for example, some of them you can find them in really tough environments. Like, for example, our partners have to collect from the banks from the seashores, which is really salty. You imagine that for such a species to be able to cope in that environment, it should have some traits that enable it to grow in that high concentration of salt. And so we are looking at the future. If we have climate change and our plants have to cope to salty soils, for example, we might need traits from such a crop wild relative to introgress it into the background of a cultivated crop so that it can cope, for example. It's the same thing with heat tolerance and so on. Some of these crop wild relatives grow in very hot places and also very cold environments, so stuff like that.
Remarkable stuff.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did. It's perfect. We're talking with Barry Bonglam, who is a technical specialist with the Global Crop Diversity Trust based out of Bonn, Germany. Last question, Barry. Tell us about croptrust.org.
So the Global Crop Diversity Trust is an international organization, and we have a mandate to conserve crop diversity in the long term, still with the same initiative that we are going to need crop diversity in order to cope with climate change. The International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources is the main policy instrument for the crop trust.
That's great. Barry Bonglam, croptrust.org is the website. The Global Crop Diversity Trust is the organization. The website or the Twitter handle rather, @CropTrust. Barry, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye.
My pleasure. Great talking with you. We will be back in just a few minutes. We'll continue our all the various conversations we've been having all day in just a moment. Stick around. It's coming up on 14 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back here in the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you in the water cooler wars. And welcome back. Adam in New Orleans. Hey, Adam, what's up?
I read your recent opinion piece on SCOTUS, and obviously I have your book. And I think you may have the wrong read on why the House is taking this impeachment tack. They have a huge problem in how to corner SCOTUS. They know it's packed, and they've not reached out to get them to enforce subpoenas or anything like that up to this point, and the question is why. I think what they're trying to do is literally paint them into a corner that they literally can't come out of politically.
So who is trying to paint who into what corner?
This is the House, by virtue of the evidence, literally trying everything in the court of public opinion to the extent that they can, so that when they reach out to the Supreme Court and say, we want your support, that they literally can't do anything unless they're willing to destroy the Constitution.
So you're suggesting, because I asked this question semi-rhetorically a couple days ago, and I'm not, the article I have in Salon right now is not specifically addressing this. It's Republicans aren't breaking with Trump because the billionaires are not breaking with Trump yet. But the question that I'd asked is why haven't the House impeachment committees gone directly to the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in disputes between branches of government. Why haven't they gone directly to the Supreme Court as they did in the Nixon impeachment, as they did in the Clinton Paula Jones case? Why haven't they gone to the Supreme Court and said, force the president, tell the president he has to turn over these documents, he has to make his people available to us for questioning? And you're suggesting that the reason why is that they want to make it so obvious to everybody in America that the Republicans are being completely, obscenely obstructionist, that when the Supreme Court finally does get the request, it will, if they do anything other than say to the executive branch, you must comply, they will look like just total toadies. Is that what you're suggesting?
We know they're corrupt. So, to your point, and what you've written so eloquently. So, yes, exactly. They have to figure out a way to make sure that they're going to win.
When do you think that point will be achieved? I mean, does that wait for the trial in the Senate, or is that the... Because I was interested to see that there was a bunch of stuff that they had withheld. They had all these phone records that they had gotten under subpoena, and there had never been a word about them. And then they dropped those things yesterday when they had the hearings in the Judiciary Committee, and everybody was like, "Whoa! You've got proof that Giuliani and Devin Nunes and Lev Parnas and all these people are talking to each other, and Trump and Mick Mulvaney are talking to each other about this stuff." So, are you suggesting that they're just going to drop this at some point, or what?
I think, and this comes down to being just politically canny, I think that Pelosi knows exactly the cards she has, and she is trying to figure out when they can pull the trigger on this and not lose.
So you think she keeps raising into a winning hand, essentially?
Exactly.
That is perceived as a losing hand.
Right.
Yeah, got it. Good one. I'll bet you're a good poker player, Adam. Adam, thanks a lot for the call.
I tried it. Yes, I enjoy poker.
There you go. Okay. Have a great afternoon. We'll be back. It's 18 minutes past the hour. So nuclear Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. So we got a geeky science alert here. This is just an absolutely amazing story. It's over at Inside Climate News. And essentially what they're saying is that our flood risk, our mudslide risk, our drought risk, all these things are going up dramatically because these giant rivers of air in the upper atmosphere are getting bigger, they're moving faster, but most importantly, they're getting denser. They hold more moisture. So as they move fast, and of course, they are what causes weather down here at the surface. This is climate causing weather. And so as the climate changes, as these rivers of air get more intense, the weather on the ground gets more intense, our storms are worse, our winds are higher, and the amount of water that falls, the rains are worse. But because it's more concentrated in these specific high moisture rivers of air, the air around it is actually drier. And so the places that are being hit by the air around them are getting droughts, and the places that are underneath these rivers of air are getting floods. And so this is just, consequence one of global climate change, something that was predicted for a long time. We're actually seeing it now. And it's not pretty, it's not a good thing. Anyhow, let's get back to our conversations of the day. Heather in Lansing, Michigan, my hometown. Hey, Heather, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I wanted to call and talk about the previous caller that mentioned the high tax rates in Finland and Denmark and, the Nordic countries. My husband and I had a chance to move our 3 kids and ourselves, of course, to Stockholm, Sweden. And we lived there for about 3 years. So I experienced the high tax rate. It worked out to be about 55%. Mm-hmm. But when you really broke down the numbers and figured out what was coming out of our pay here versus the tax rate we were paying there, it was about the same. I'd have to say maybe it was 50% here after you include things like your health insurance premiums and co-pays and Social Security and all of the things that just come out.
And sales taxes and property taxes and everything else.
Yeah. I mean, you get state, local, federal, depending on the state you live in. And all of those things added up to almost the same amount. But what we're getting for that money when we're in Stockholm are things like I never had a copay. I never had to worry about getting seen by a doctor. We never, ever had any charges for medication. All the medications for children under 20 are free, no matter what.
Wow.
We would get a stipend for each one of the children under 20, and they all were at the time, which equated to about $200 a month that went directly to them for their incidental expenses, like they all had a transportation card so they could ride the subway or the buses, and it just didn't come out of our pockets. So we ended up making a lower income than we did here when you did I can't think of the word, when you convert your money from U.S. to Swedish crowns. We had a lower income, but we had more disposable income. We were able to take a vacation in the Canary Islands. And I mean, it blew me away how nice it was to live under that scheme. And it blows me away now when people don't get it, that, your taxes will go up, but everything else goes away.
Right.
So you end up being in a better financial position as a result, and you really don't have to worry. If you get cancer, you're not going to go broke.
Right. So your quality of life and your level of anxiety are dramatically improved.
Absolutely. And, if you go into the doctor, I'm a chubby American. I was probably one of the fattest people in the country when I got there because everyone is so fit because of the lifestyle that they live. But, you go to the doctor for a checkup, and they can say, well, you really should work out. So here's a gym membership included in your taxes.
Whoa.
Go to the gym, no charge, because you need it. It was just, you can't even wrap your brain around the mentality of get healthy, stay healthy, you pay for it, and we're here, no problem. Even dental, dental was covered.
Yeah.
It's just, it was fantastic, and I miss it every day. And the reason we came back wasn't because we didn't enjoy the lifestyle. It was the housing crisis there. We got there at about the same time that the refugee crisis hit. And by the time it came time for us to decide whether to stay or go, there just wasn't any housing available, let alone affordable housing. There just weren't properties to move into. They're building now, but it was too much. It was not the quality of life or the tax rates or any of that. There wasn't enough housing because they had so many people they brought in.
That's remarkable.
So I challenge anyone to do the math, if they can, to compare how much of their income comes out that they aren't even really thinking about to pay for what they think is such great coverage and great health care compared to what would come out for universal coverage.
That's great. Heather, thank you for the testimony.
Absolutely. Anytime.
It's great to hear from you. Thank you so much. Greg in Everett, Washington. Hey, Greg, you wanted to weigh in on this?
Yes. The conservative mind, they always throw up how we're going to pay for it. I was very disappointed in the last debate that even some Democrats kind of fell into that trap too and said, well, how are you going to pay for it, Elizabeth? Or how are you going to pay for it, Bernie?
Right.
We're paying over $1 trillion every year just in the industrial war complex. We're paying $1 trillion for war to kill people.
I think it's about $720 billion, but point made.
Yeah, and when you add in the corporate giveaways and the tax breaks for the billionaires, there you go.
Yeah, that's another couple $1 trillion a year that we're giving away.
They never talk about that. That's our money too. We're paying that money every year.
Well,
and if that money, like I said, if it went to help people rather than to kill people, we could pay for a lot of this stuff, if not all of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well said. Greg, thank you very much. George in Garden City, Kansas. Hey, George, what's up?
Just saw a little news flash across the bottom of the TV screen this morning, Tom. Wanted you to comment on it. It said, Trump campaign bans Bloomberg News from all presidential events.
Right, I saw that too.
Did you see that? Okay, I just don't know if you'd missed it or not. I just wanted your comments on that. I appreciate them.
I think it's a violation of the Constitution. We're supposed to have a free and independent press, and the freedom of the press shall not be infringed is literally the language in the First Amendment. And what if it was an individual company or an individual politician for that matter saying, I don't want to talk to the press in the context of issues or whatever, but this is in the context of Donald Trump doing his job and saying we're not going to let Bloomberg press in. I think it's wrong. I think it's a violation of the Constitution. I think it's a slap in the face of the First Amendment.
I agree, sir. Thank you for your opinion.
You're welcome. Thank you, George. Thanks for the call, and thanks for pointing that out. There's so many little things that kind of slip through the cracks. Well, not little things, but so many things that slip through the cracks, like Betsy DeVos's scheme to screw people with student debt. It's amazing.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Speech TV is doing the 50-state challenge. It's starting today. It continues to December 11th. A donor has stepped up and, bless you, whoever you may be, and said they're going to make a $50,000 donation to a $10,000 donation to Free Speech TV if people in 50 states. All 50 states, one new donor in each state can be acquired or whatever. If one new person who has never before donated to Free Speech TV pick up the phone right now and call 877-378-8669 and make a donation of any amount, $1, whatever it may be, any amount today. Actually, it's going to run for a week or so. We'll let you know if we hit it. I think this is, just looking at this from a mathematical point of view, if you live in a state that has a small population, like Vermont with 600,000 people or Wyoming with a little over 1 million, and you have never donated to Free Speech TV before, and you are inclined to think that this is a network worth supporting, now would be a great time. Now, yeah, I mean, if you're in a big state too, but, in a state with millions and millions of people, California, I'm guessing, will get a new donor today without a problem. Although if you're in California, don't hesitate. But particularly small and medium-sized states, call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution. If we can get 50 states in on this thing, $10,000 goes to Free Speech TV. So your gift becomes much, much bigger, no matter how much your gift is. Free Speech TV is such a vital part of the American progressive media infrastructure. We need this network. We need it alive. We need it strong. We need it continuing. We need your help. We can't do it without you. So please call now, 877-378-8669. Free Speech TV literally does not exist without donations from our listeners. And help keep the great programming on the air that you really like, the shows that you really like, help us keep this thing going. So please call now, 877-378-8669. I realize it's the holiday season. We don't have gift cards that say, a donation has been made in your name to Free Speech TV, but you can create one. If you've got Christmas cards and you want to send a note to somebody, you want to call and make a contribution to Free Speech TV. I don't think they have a way of tracking it, but you could do it. I mean, you don't need anything from Free Speech TV to do this. Just, write in your Christmas card, I made a donate, and in fact, you could tell numerous people that you made a Free Speech TV donation in their name. It's a way of kind of spreading the word, and hopefully next holiday season we can do something like this. We did years ago, I know, and if I got a Christmas card from somebody and it said, hey, I made a donation to Free Speech TV and I'm doing it in my mind, in your name. I'm doing it in recognition of our friendship. I think that would be a cool thing. So, you can get creative. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this. But also, Free Speech TV also has, these premiums, and, we're getting pretty close to the holiday season. This is the shortest period between Thanksgiving and Christmas possible is right now. I mean, it's happening this year. So I doubt that things will be arriving before Christmas. But for example, if you wanted to give all 3 of my books to somebody, the $360 or $30 a month gift, you could send them a Christmas card saying that, you're going to be getting these because I made this donation. And when I get the books, I'll send them to you, and they're all autographed by the author. But the premiums today, the sticker Gravity is the only law Trump hasn't broken. It's $20. The tote bag, Nobody is Above the Law, that's $50. There's a $120 T-shirt gift. That would be $10 a month for a year, or just $120 up front. The online after class with Professor Thom, that's $240. Or $20 a month for a year. The 3 books I mentioned earlier, that is my new book on ADHD, Hunter and a Farmer's World, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Those 3 books, $360. And a $1,000 gift, come to Portland and hang out with us, and we'll have a nice time. And just like with the $240 gift, our virtual meet and greet, our online meet and greet, whatever you want to talk about, I'm up for it. We can discuss anything. We've had some pretty wild and pretty interesting conversations in some of these meet and greets, both in person and online. But now, please call, particularly, like I said, if you're in a small or medium-sized state. But no matter where you are, if you've never donated to Free Speech TV before, today is the day. Please call now, 877-378-8669. That's 877-378-8669. You can also donate online at freespeech.org. So please call now and make... Here, check out my new weekly podcast, The Science Revolution. On this week's podcast, ADHD. Are you a hunter in a farmer's world? Look out! Dr. Bun Strauss is here on the rising sea levels and those in the path. And there's more. You can find it now wherever fine podcasts are available, and it's free. More info at thomhartmann.com or over on our Facebook page. So I've been arguing that we should go wide rather than narrow with regard to the impeachment inquiry. Some of the things that I've come up with, denying climate change, I think that that's impeachable. It's actually putting our nation at risk. It's all over the world. He's threatened world peace by upending our alliances with democratic nations and instead throwing in with dictators like Erdogan. He's sold off public lands to his donors and cronies. He's devastated our public parks and sacred places. He's got an anti-labor Secretary of Labor and an anti-education Secretary of Education. He's corrupting our government. He's enriched himself at the expense of the American people. He's put people like Jared Kushner, a grifter and clear security risk, in a position to have access to America's most sensitive secrets. He's welcomed foreign interference in our elections. That's kind of the one thing that they're focused on with regard to this impeachment. He's betrayed the Kurds. He's supported the coups in Bolivia and Venezuela. He's supported Kellyanne Conway in her repeated violations of the Hatch Act, and not just her, other members of his administration as well. He has refused to turn over his tax returns to the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee as required by law. He's given government contracts to big donors on a no-bid basis. He's cut his own taxes. He's burned Israeli intel by giving secrets to Russia in the White House, in the Oval Office, right after he was inaugurated. He's put kids in cages. He instituted a religious travel ban, violating the separation of church and state. He's labeled the press the enemy of the people, violating the First Amendment protection for a free and independent press. So that's my list so far. And, people have been calling in and adding to that list. And we will be posting that list later today or first thing tomorrow morning. I'm not sure. It's Louise kind of runs our Facebook posts when that's going to happen over on Facebook, and you can add things to it if you would like. And of course, I'll continue taking your calls. One other thing I wanted to put on your radar screen. I think you can expect this to be coming out from Trump via tweet or via, helicopter talk or whatever it may be in the next few days. I'd be willing to bet on it. And that is that Trump is going to come out and he's going to say, if the Democrats continue with this impeachment talk, we're going to have a recession. Because the leading indicators are showing that there is a recession on the way. It's already happening. October, just manufacturing, in the last 6 months, manufacturing jobs in the United States have shrunk by 23,000. 23,000 people in the manufacturing sector have been laid off or fired. And the total number of hours worked, average hours worked, has shrunk to the lowest level in 8 years. So we're back, in terms of manufacturing, we're back to numbers that we saw on the tail end of the Great Recession. In fact, the number of people employed in manufacturing is now below where it was in 2008. So, over the course of the next 6 to 18 months, you're going to see that increase in unemployment and that decrease in high-paid jobs translate into fewer people buying things. That's aggregate demand. It's called wages. Fewer people buying things, less demand for goods and services, so companies will be laying off more people. And this is the opposite of a virtuous cycle. This is the death spiral that you get into when you go into a recession or a depression. So there you go. Keep an eye out, because Trump knows a recession is coming. He's going to try and blame it on the Democrats and on impeachment. Mark my words. Peter in Chilliwack, Washington. Hey, Peter, what's up?
Hey there, Tom. Long time no speak.
Thank you. Thank you for calling. What's up?
You betcha. I want to follow the thread of, it's Chilliwack, Washington.
Chilliwack, thank you.
I wanted to follow the thread of the lady with living with her family in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to you a few years ago about my experience of living in New Zealand for the better part of the 80s. And when I was there, I worked, I had my own practice, alternative healthcare provider.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, at my income level, I was being taxed, around 55 cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And to most Americans, of course, that's outrageous.
Right. Right.
But you know what? It felt good to me because I knew where those dollars were going, and it was showing even in my daily practice. I knew the bulk of those tax dollars were going for health care. They were going, I saw a number of solo parents, single parents, and those parents all owned their own homes so that they could provide their children with a safe place and education.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at it, you know, it was well worth 55 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
On those two levels.
Yeah. And
go
ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that we may be the only country in the world that has these two dysfunctional systems, and there's a reason for it, which I'll get to in just a second. The first is that we pay for education with property taxes, and what that does is it guarantees that poor neighborhoods will have crappy schools and rich neighborhoods will have good schools. And we don't have a national health care system, which guarantees that you're going to have some people who have poor health care, or the equivalent of poor health insurance, or no access to health insurance, and some people who have extraordinary health care insurance. Now, when you dig into why these two things happened, it turns out that they both go back to the legacy of slavery in the United States. That from the time that Franklin Roosevelt first proposed a national health care system, Harry Truman re-proposed it a second time. If you look at this history, the people who were arguing against it were the Southern white, they were Democrats back at the time, the white racist party, essentially, prior to the 1960s, who said, no, we can't have that because you're going to be using my tax dollars to give free health care to black people. And the same thing with the schools. The reason that our property tax-based school systems were put into place was to keep poor black neighborhoods poor. And you know, no other, to the best of my knowledge, no other developed country in the world does either of those things that way. And we do it purely as a consequence of racism in the United States. I would say ongoing to this day. How anybody can look at these systems and not understand where they came from and how they came about, you know, with just a little bit of thought, just baffles me. Yeah.
So to carry on with the thread here is the fact that what I learned from my experience was at that tax level that I described to you, and that's so appalling to your average American, is the fact that the America, and I don't know if, I think we can say this even today, America is one of the lowest taxed industrial countries in the world.
That's correct. It's not the lowest tax.
And you would agree that that's still the way.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
To finish with this,
but we're also the lowest wages, Peter. See, that's the point. When working people pay high tax rates, they also get high wages. So their take-home pay is pretty much the same all over the world. You know, the people who work, actually, it's a higher standard of living everywhere else except, you know, outside of the United States, because of all of these weird things that have been built into our system. But you know, the tax rate is inconsequential. It's how much money you take home at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. So to finish this is a conversation I had with somebody that's bent is on the right, and a dear friend who, when I told him my experience, and of course that all equates to the term socialism, right? And he said, "Oh yeah, but you know the problem with that is is that, if every, I don't want to be held up making $50,000 a year if that's the mean. I want to, I don't want to be told I can only make $50,000 a year.
Right.
And I, think about that relative to the 1% and the rest of it. It's like, no, you're not being held back from making 50.
Right. It's the very
a year.
Right. The very rich people.
More tax.
Right, exactly. The very rich people are the ones who actually see their income go down if tax rates go up. Working class people actually see their income go up when tax rates go up. So somehow the very rich people have convinced us all to think like we're rich people, when in fact we're not rich people, and that's the mind-boggling thing. Peter, thanks for sharing your story. It's great to hear it from you again, and thank you. A little note of sanity here. These are good things. These conversations. It's 44 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Speaking the truths the multinational corporations would really rather you don't know all about. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Julian in Clatskanie, Oregon. Hey, Julian, what's up? Thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV.
How's it going, Tom? I wanted to try to convince you to enter treason into that list, because in my opinion, we are at a state of war because Russia is intentionally attacking our political system and our voting system through cyber means. Okay.
So we're in a cyber war, you're saying?
We're in a cyber war, and we need to look at how our society needs to adapt our definitions of war to challenge what's actually going on in our society.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So, I think it's important that we look at treason because, this is literally, they're basically giving power to an outside country, and the Republicans are definitely corrupt in this. And it's mind-boggling that, when Obama came in, we had military people saying horrible things about him without any recourse. But Trump comes in, and we've got Russia that's helping him, and we hear nothing from our military about how we need to be facing this.
It is weird.
Yeah.
It is weird.
It's terrifying, actually, to me. But
yeah, I was never a fan of the, oh my God, we've got to be hysterical about the Soviet Union or the Russians or whatever. I lived through the duck and cover, in the 1950s as a kid in elementary school. And I think it was the Vietnam War that caused me to think that, this is not, which was a proxy war between the United States and the Soviet Union, to think that this is not the real danger to our society. I think the real danger to our society is basically right-wingers inside our society. But
what has gone on is nationalists in all societies have been allied with Russia.
It's not so much nationalists. It's like the world oligarchic class, the billionaires of the planet have gotten together. And by the way, there's a huge data dump from one of these companies that does what the Panama Papers company did. I don't know if you've seen the new movie about the Panama Papers, but they make shell companies for rich people and help them hide their money so they don't have to pay taxes and stuff. And, like a multi-gigabyte, or maybe a terabyte data dump. And there's going to be some big stories coming up in the next few days about this. But, they're still at it. There is this class of billionaires who and there's literally the word enough is not part of their vocabulary. And
if we want to look at it the billionaires are still going to be problematic. But right now, a lot of them are invested in oil and the big oil.
Yeah.
The United States, yes, is big in oil, but the Soviet Union is using oil as a crutch in their economy.
Yeah, or you mean Russia, but yeah.
It's very important to them.
But my point, and I think we're saying the same thing. I think that the American the American right-wing billionaires, I don't want to portray all billionaires as terrible. I mean, look at Tom Steyer. But the American right-wing billionaires have more in common with the Russian or Ukrainian or Turkish right-wing billionaires than they do with average people in the United States.
Well, yeah. I mean, average people in the United States won't do the things that these billionaires have done to get their money.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. Julian, thank you for the call. Yep, well said. We'll be back. It's 48 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Talk media for the sane still among us. We'll be right back. Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Richard in Yuma, Arizona. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Hey, this is Yuma, Arizona.
Yuma, Arizona. There you go. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I listen to your show, and I'm very grateful that we get it on DirecTV, and I've watched you through the years, and I'm amazed at what comes across. One of the things that I wanted to discuss with you was I think Hillary got it all wrong. She said deplorables. Actually, she should have said deplorables.
In other words, you're saying that when Hillary talked about the deplorables and she was talking about Trump voters, right. She was characterizing them as, morally deficient or stupid or something, and really they're just misinformed. They're the dupes. They're the people that Trump has duped. Is that your point?
Absolutely, you bet.
Yeah. Well said. I don't want to specifically criticize Hillary, but I think your point is well made, Richard, and I agree with it. Kim in Olympia, Washington. Hey, Kim, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I have a really simple formula if you want to go broad for the impeachment.
Okay.
He has broken, I'm going to go with 5 times a day. We get news of him breaking trust, the law, blah, blah, blah. If you put how many days he's been in office, which I'm going with 1,049 times 5, you have 5,555 articles of impeachment. I want to say I agree with the strategy right now. They are cutting off, Congress is cutting off the head of the beast. He has a whole corrupt network that is doing his bidding, and we need to remove him or at least get it on the record as quickly as possible. There are books written that will be books written that will go down in history to all of his crimes in his administration. But people need to get the message that you need to stop being corrupt. And the Democrats are following the rule of law. They're showing us what true states people are, and we need to support them. They are returning to our values and our principles.
Amen.
And I encourage people to join a group because we can have all the opinions, but when we come together, we are strong. We took Congress back. We're winning elections in 2019, and it's groups doing the work on the ground. Join a group. get your opinions with a group.
Yep. Get out there, get active, tag You're It. I'm with you. And Kim, I totally support. In fact, I just wrote down 10,000 lies. It's actually 10,000 plus. That should be an article. You know, the one hit that the Republicans always put on Barack Obama is when he said if you like your doctor, you can keep him under Obamacare. He lied for about 3% of people, right? And if that's like, as far as I know, the only thing that Barack Obama said in 8 years that wasn't 100% truthful. And I think when he said it, he believed it was truthful. Donald Trump, on the other hand, literally has told over 10,000 lies. He lies every single day. I think that your point is well taken. Thank you, Kim. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Great show as usual.
Thank you.
And I agree with you on going wide because the only reason to rush this through and go narrow would have been if the momentum of Ukraine-gate was going to be enough to get the Republicans to put the Constitution and morality over party allegiance. And obviously that
has not happened.
Yeah. So we need a comprehensive historical document on all the high crimes and misdemeanors of this criminally corrupt administration. And if you saw, Robert Reich wrote in The Guardian this past Saturday, and I'm paraphrasing, if we impeach Trump on grounds that include a raft of federal crimes, then he can't be pardoned for any of them and will be openly liable to them at some point in the future. And in my opinion, Tom, that's where it gets interesting. Priding himself on being such a deal maker, rather than risk getting locked up when he leaves office, could Democratic leadership persuade Dirty Don to resign and walk away before they hit him with a broad swath of impeachment articles that'll be on the hook for later? You tell us, Tom, wasn't this part of Nixon's calculation to resign?
Sure. Yeah, it was. He knew he was going to get convicted, and so he boogied out of town. Excellent point, Jeff. Thank you. Abdul in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Abdul, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Yeah, I just also wanted to add to the lady who said she lived in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't know why we've not been able to reach the outside populace so that they can be aware that there's something good in that.
So did you lived in a country that had a national health care system and high taxes?
Oh, sure. I mean, you don't have to worry about co-pays.
Where was that?
You don't have to worry. No, I'm just saying what the lady said, the story she gave when she moved to Sweden.
Yeah.
And the other gentleman even called and was trying to support that as well.
So your experience was the same as hers. Was that in the United Kingdom?
No, I mean, I worked for Oxfam, but I wasn't based in the United Kingdom, but it was a similar situation.
Right.
But then I couldn't meet it here, and the amount of stress around healthcare,
right.
How it's just too much. So I don't know why this is not yet outside the domain of the public.
I agree. This is why we're seeing these diseases of despair. We're seeing an explosion in deaths that are the consequence of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and obesity. And these are considered diseases of despair. Abdul, thank you for the call. Boy, what a day. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. But in the meantime, don't forget, democracy doesn't just happen. It doesn't fall out of the sky. It requires all of us getting active and involved and showing up and participating, and that includes you. And by the way, it's great therapy, right? If you're a little freaked out or feeling a little depressed or bummed out or seasonal affective disorder or whatever it may be, show up for drinking liberally, show up for your local Democratic Party, show up for Indivisible, whatever you can find. Participate. Get out there, get active, tag You're It, and tell your friends about progressive media. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.